Ben, I've told you a million times, I'm not going to see The Irishman.
Wait, what has that got to do with anything?
Kept talking about it before the mics were on, remember?
Gonna tell you a story. Oh, yeah.
Okay, we're in for a show today, guys. All right, I think we're ready here. Calm down, slamming that drink.
I got to tell you about the water here at the Chicago Sun-Times.
Oh, tell us about it.
Delicious.
Oh, delicious, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, everybody, weigh in if you're listening on the live. Oh, by the way, YouTube live stream chat. Well, we're going to level with you guys. Kind of a slow news day locally, all right? So if you got any questions, anything you would like to weigh in with on the show today, it's Freaky Friday. Today's your day, all right? Anything goes Friday, I guess you could call it. Weigh in with a question or whatever you have on the live stream chat, and we will be sure to ask that. And, hey, you'll help us kill some time on the Ben Joravsky Show, all right?
Man, there's a lot to talk about, but yeah, I hear you. I welcome the questions.
Your Ben Joravsky Show for Friday, December 13th. Oh, it's Friday the 13th. It's just moments away, but before we get in...
Oh, it is.
Whoa. Real astute people running this podcast, by the way, guys.
Yeah, it is Friday the 13th. Mm-hmm.
Halfway into the day, we just realized it. Oh, we're awesome. All right. Your Ben Joravsky Show for Friday, December 13th is just moments away. But before we get into this, we need to thank the following unions for jumping on board and sponsoring this program. First up, it's the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace, not Aerosmith Workers, Local 126 and District 8. The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9. The International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150, sponsor this program. And, of course, today's Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you by our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. Ben Joravsky, let's hit him with that song of the day, huh?
I'm gonna tell you a story every man ought to know. If you want a little loving, you gotta start real slow. Hey, hey, hey.
Oh, wow. All right. Pete Cunningham may be looking for someone in his band. Just saying.
That's Roy Head, by the way, just so you know. The great Roy Head.
The Ben Joravsky Show starts now. It is Friday, December 13th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. Today on the program, it's another Romana Rundown with Chicago Sun-Times editor Romana Hussain. 25th Ward Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez will join us with Loreen Targos. And now your host, Chicago Reader columnist, Benny J. Joravsky.
Hello, everybody. Ben Joravsky here. We're calling this Happy Hour Friday. And here's why. Great column in the Reader this week by my partner in crime, Maya Dukmasova.
That's correct.
Thank you. Mueller just weighs in on that one. It deals with Eddygate. Eddygate, of course, is the name that we've given to the scandal that has surrounded Eddie Johnson, the former chief of police, right here in the city of Chicago. A scandal, folks, that says so much in so many ways about our existence on planet Earth. Yes, indeed. I mean, I know it's not the greatest scandal in the world, but in so many ways, it just speaks to our existence. All right, let me just go back in time and tell you exactly what the scandal. You may have forgotten, or some out there don't know. Some people stumbling upon this podcast for the first time do not know what Eddygate is.
Welcome to the podcast, by the way, everybody.
Welcome to the. I'm going to tell you a story. I wish you hadn't.
We're idiots.
I wish you hadn't put that song in my mind, man. That's Roy Head, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway,
I don't know how I put that song in your head.
I don't know how you did either. Anyway, all right, let's focus, Ben, focus. Eddie Johnson is the former police chief of the city of Chicago, and he was found slumped behind the wheel of his car, not far from his house on the south side of Chicago in the wee hours of October 17th. And boy, the way that set up a scene. Just imagine if you're the patrolman who discovered Eddie Johnson there. You find your boss, the chief of police, the top man on the totem pole, passed out behind the wheel. What do you do? I'll tell you what you do if you're in the city of Chicago, the country of the United States, or anywhere else. You pass it on to someone else higher up the ladder. That is for somebody to make a decision about that has a higher pay grade than you. And so it was that ultimately Lori Lightfoot, mayor of the city of Chicago, had to weigh in on it. Now, Eddie Johnson was not appointed to his position by Lori Lightfoot. He was appointed to his position by the previous mayor, Dennis's favorite mayor, Mayor Rahm. But
how'd you know?
I just wanted to see if you were paying attention. Anyway, but Lori Lightfoot had kept him on. So in some ways, you could say that Eddie Johnson was Lori Lightfoot's police chief because she decided to keep him on. Anyway, so she had to decide what to do about Eddie Johnson. And so she came to the conclusion that nothing he had done that night warranted discipline. She basically said she talked to Eddie Johnson, and Eddie Johnson told her that he may have had a drink or two, a glass of wine with some friends, but nothing significant, so he wasn't drunk, and so there was no need to take a breath analyzer test. Furthermore, it may have been his blood pressure pills, medication that made him sleepy, whatever. Nothing there to see. Just move on, Chicago. And then suddenly, turns out there was more to the story than that. It turns out 2 months later, was it 2 months later? Yeah, it was like December. Yeah, 2 months later, all of a sudden, Lori Lightfoot holds a press conference to announce there were more details that Eddie Johnson had never told her. Details like he hadn't just had a glass of wine or two with friends. He was out carousing, drinking at a bar called Surrey's Cafe in the West Loop, which is known for giving humongous amounts of alcohol in drinks. That's like a little bit here, but like big time drinks.
They're serving 40s, guys.
What's a 40?
Oh, my God. A 40 ounce.
Oh, 40 ounce. They serve 40s. And it turns out he just wasn't hanging out with a few friends. Oh, no, negatory. He was making out at the bar with a woman who's not his wife, D. Chicago was shocked. The woman was not his wife, all right? And turned out there's all these other theories. Turns out that perhaps a lot of speculation that he wasn't sleeping behind the wheel of that car. That when the police officer came there, he saw Eddie Johnson being serviced, if you will, by someone, if you know what I'm talking about, Dr. D. Now, just imagine that. If you're a relatively lowly patrolman in the city of Chicago and you stumble upon your boss in the front seat of his car getting I don't think I'm allowed to say this on the air with you, D, because you always make me clean up my language, right?
Yeah.
So service is what's all I'll say, because Dr. D really, he has a tight reins on me when it comes to, saying anything.
That's correct.
Thank you, Robert Mueller. Anyway, Lori Lightfoot's outraged. She immediately fires him, says he's lied. The internal inspector general is doing a report. We're going to hear about Eddygate in so many different ways for time to come. Here's what Maya wrote about. Some dude created a Facebook invitation. Let's calling for a Getting Eddie Johnson Drunk at Siri's Cafe party. It happened the other day, and about 36 people showed up, including Maya, a very enterprising reporter. Maya showed up. She goes where the story is, D. So she went to the bar and hung out and watched and listened and watched as everybody got royally drunk, drinking drinks just like Eddie Johnson and weighing in. And if you read her story, what's so delightful about it and what's so interesting and entertaining and enlightening that it's just so classic. The things that people had to say are just so symbolic of the Chicago view of life. Everyone is so jaded. Everyone is so cynical. But everyone is kind of enjoying it all. Very few people believe the official story that was given about any of the aspect. No one believes, apparently, or very few people believe that Eddie Johnson was just sleeping behind the wheel. Very few people believes he got fired for lying. Most people think that Lori Lightfoot was just looking for any old excuse just to fire him and found this one as a convenient one. And finally, very few people believe that him drinking at the bar, making out with a woman who's not his wife, falling asleep or getting serviced in his car outside of his house in the wee hours is justification for getting fired. This is my favorite part of the story, D. It's like all the crimes that somebody could commit or all the bad acts that somebody can commit as chief of police get overlooked. This is what takes him down. It reminds me of Donald John Trump. He's getting taken down well, he won't be taken down because you know the Republicans will vote to acquit him. But of all the things that Donald John Trump has done since he's been president, he's getting impeached for the Ukrainian phone call. And it's like the stuff that will get you in trouble is never as bad as the stuff you to get away with every day. Anyway, great story. I urge everybody to read it. And we have a great show today. Romana.
Maya.
The crowd is going, we have to post that on our Facebook page.
What?
The Maya story.
Oh.
I'll send it to you at the next break. Anyway, we have a great show today. Romana Hussain will be in here. She'll be weighing in on, we're going to be talking, one of the things we're talking about, it's funny, great minds think alike. When I called Romana today, what do you want to talk about? Richard Jewell, the new movie by Clint Eastwood. It's supposed to be an accurate portrayal of how a fake news ruined one man's life. And in the telling of that tale, they kind of make up a story about a woman reporter. So it's like you have to do fake movie making to make a movie about fake news. And it gets into the whole issue. Well, I'll save it for when Romana's here. The fake news part of Richard Jewell, we talk about that. How about talking about Dorothy Brown? She no corruption in the clerk's office. Dorothy Brown isn't indicted or convicted of anything, but one of her aides goes to jail. Isn't that interesting? In the Eddie Johnson story, we talk about people get in trouble, don't get in trouble for the real bad stuff that they do, and they get in trouble for the extraneous stuff. It's the perfectly legal, acceptable stuff that is the outrage, but people just fly through life doing that. Somehow or other, it's always aides to powerful people that go to prison. I'm thinking of Michael Cohen. He's in jail right now. Donald Trump is still president of the United States. Same thing happened with the clerk of the circuit court. Bina Patel is going to prison. We'll talk about that. And Donald Trump is a lunatic, D. I think he should be Trump. He should be impeached for some of his stupid tweets. How about that? We'll be talking about some of Donald Trump's outrageous behavior. And then in the second part of the show, I can't wait, Byron Sigcho-Lopez, the alderman of the 25th Ward, outspoken and outstanding, what is he? Democrat socialist in the city council. We're talking about budget issues and policing issues and Mayor Lori Lightfoot issues and development issues. And Loreen Targos will be here as well. And she is the activist EP. I've talked about her. I've had her on the show before. A great crusader for the environment, and who was the one who did that civil disobedience at an EPA award ceremony back this summer. So a lot of political discussion of all kinds, national and local, ahead of us. Before we do any of that, the young man with the news.
How's it going, guys? Young man here.
I didn't call you the doctor because you don't like to be called the doctor.
Oh, yeah, that's stopped you before.
In the pre-show, he said, Ben, I don't want to be called the doctor anymore. I said, okay, can I call you
Can we have a
doctor?
talk, Ben? Listen, I know you have fun calling me the doctor, but it really hurts. Don't call me doctor. And don't call me boy.
You the man, boy.
You the man, boy. All right, I'm Dennis, by the way. Before we find out what's happening in Chicago and or Illinois for the fourth and final time this week, we need to shamelessly plug our weekend Benny J bonus interviews.
Oh, we got some good ones.
True, we do not do our regular 1 to 3 p.m. show on Saturdays, Sundays, or Mondays. But
Nope.
if you think that we don't have anything for you to listen to on those days, that, my friends, would be false. Because we here on the Ben Joravsky Show, and by we, I mean just me and Ben. By the way, Ben, did you give our 2 o'clock guest my phone number so I can let them in the building?
Oops.
All right, we'll do that on commercial breaks.
Oh, you don't want me to do it now?
Yeah, we'll do it on commercial breaks. Several hats on the Ben Joravsky Show.
Including, I'm wearing about 10 of them right now.
But hey, we here on the Benny J Show, we offer up fresh, brand new content for you to download at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites and wherever else you download podcasts every Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. Here's this weekend's lineup. On Saturday, available by 5 a.m., she's talking all things let's get Donald Trump the hell out of office in the 2020 POTUS election. It's well-known Chicago media superstar Marge Halperin.
Yes, and with Indivisible Chicago, it's a great conversation talking about congressional districts, swing districts, what Democrats can do to hold on to those districts and take them back, and also talking about what to do in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Marge makes it clear Democrats should learn the lessons of 2016. You just can't leave things up to the National Party. You can't leave things up to whichever presidential campaign, whichever presidential contender we have running. You have to take control. You sort of have to chart your own destiny here. And so they're already gearing up to send volunteers into Wisconsin and Michigan and parts of Illinois where there's congressional swing districts. So Marge lays out the strategy. Fascinating talk with Marge Halperin.
So that's Saturday's Benny J bonus interview, available by 5 a.m. Subscribe and download. Up next, and people, if you could only see the look on Ben Joravsky's face as he was conducting it. Oh, he was having a great time. We talked one-on-one with a gentleman named Buzz Palmer and his son, and no, not the legendary basketball player. His name is David Robinson.
Buzz Palmer is a legend in the city of Chicago, and it was just yes, my face was like Christmas time here. Our face was all lit up. He formed the Afro-American Patrolmen's League back in the 60s. He's born and raised in Chicago. He was a spy he was a CIA operative. He talks a lot about, or analyst, I should say, back in the 50s. And he went from there to becoming a patrolman, a policeman in the city of Chicago, and felt it was imperative to organize the Afro-American Patrolmen's League. Fascinating conversation with Buzz Palmer about just the whole relations between black residents and police officers. We get into old spying stuff from the 50s and the 60s. And then we did a lot of Harold Washington talk. Buzz Palmer was a big ally, friend, and supporter of Harold Washington. And so a lot of real important history that still relates today. I urge absolutely everybody should be taking that interview with Buzz Palmer, D, and playing it in the public schools, teaching kids a little bit about our history. The great, the legendary Buzz Palmer.
That interview with Buzz Palmer and David Robinson will be available Sunday morning by 5 a.m. at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites and wherever else you download podcasts. And finally, Monday, a good friend returned to the program. She's a political strategist, and a pretty damn good one, if you ask us. She's Joanna Klonsky, and Ben, she brought a friend with her. Isn't that right?
Elena Hampton was in the studio with Joanna. Elena Hampton is the former Democratic political operative who sued Michael Madigan's organization and the Democratic Party regarding her allegations of sexual harassment or harassment, and she settled that case. We talk a lot about the Me Too era in politics, take a deep dive, and her experiences. Very interesting story, Elena Hampton, revealing a lot of what she went through over the last couple of years. And then we do a little political, Joanna's in the studio, so we do a little political, we talked a little bit about the Harvey Weinstein case, et cetera, and so forth. So fascinating conversation with Joanna Klonsky and Elena Hampton.
That interview will drop Monday at 5 a.m. along with Buzz Palmer on Sunday, Marge Halperin on Saturday. And if you need to catch up on the major local stories this week before a new week of news begins, make sure to download our Oh, What a Week It Was Week in Review Best of Special. That will drop on Sunday night. It's our Benny J bonus interviews. Subscribe to the Ben Joravsky Show and download them, or Ben and I will be very mad and never talk to you again. Isn't that right?
Mm-hmm.
He means it.
I want to tell you a story.
What?
Every man ought to know.
Is this a song?
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the local news. And hey, I got to
If you want a little loving, you got to start real slow.
Wow, no one cares. Okay.
Just remember that. If you want a little loving, you got to start real slow.
Let me write that down. Want a little loving.
You got to start real slow. That's where I had.
Start real fast?
No, slow.
Slow. Okay, great.
If you want a little loving. Actually, and Bruce Springsteen, your favorite, does his cover version of that. Instead of slow, he says low. Interesting.
Oh, wait, let me look. Yeah, everybody tuned out. It's just you and me talking to ourselves.
Did I tell you that Otis Redding does a cover of that story as well?
All right, let's talk about the local news. And hey, I got to be honest with you, people. Pretty slow news day out there. Not a lot going on. Watch out for that tumbleweed bin.
You just wanted an excuse to play that tumbleweed thing, and it's a pretty good one.
I spent like 20 minutes looking for a tumbleweed
I need a tumbleweed thing. I came in, hey, D, what's going on? Don't bother me. I'm looking for tumbleweed. He's very temperamental in the morning, by the way. Like, he's the young doctor from Alton. He's working that board and doing all kinds of board things.
He's not lying. All right, so not a lot going on. So what you're about to hear, people, is a tutorial on how to kill time on a podcast, at least until your 1:30 guest arrives. By the way, you just heard lesson number 1 on how to kill time on a podcast, at least until your 1:30 guest arrives. Plug your weekend bonus shows.
That's correct. Well, I would have hoped you would have done that anyway, because, you have to promote stuff, D.
All right, first up, no public event scheduled for Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Ben, it's Friday afternoon. What do you think Mayor Lightfoot's doing right now?
She's having lunch.
Lunch? Mm-hmm. Is it a luncheon, perhaps?
Either that or gala.
Oh, okay. Well, no, that's J.B. Pritzker. He likes the galas. Lori Lightfoot's luncheon.
Oh, then she's having a lunch and he's having a gala.
And no new major Lori Lightfoot news to discuss this afternoon thus far. But in case you missed it, we talked about this in hour number 2 of Thursday's show, right before our interview with PC Peter Cunningham. Mayor Lori Lightfoot on Thursday defiantly defended, well, this is, by the way, from Fran the Woman Spielman at Chicago Sun-Times. Mayor Lori Lightfoot on Thursday defiantly defended her decision to use money from her newly created Political Action Committee, also known as a PAC, P-A-C, to shame the 11 aldermen who dared to vote against her $11.6 billion budget.
Yes, that's billion with a B.
By creating a website called ChicagoBudgetVotes.com and posting the 11 aldermen's names on the website. Alderman Raymond Lopez of the 15th Ward, who was one of the 11 aldermen who opposed the budget, has argued the mayor's website belittles legitimate concerns about the shaky nature of the mayor's budget, and no pun intended here, or maybe, I don't know, and, quote, shines the light on the true nature of her character being petty and vindictive. The mayor went on to say, defending her actions, quote, since when is letting voters and residents know how aldermen voted bullying? That's just silly. We have an absolute right to make sure that people really understand who voted, why they voted, what they voted for. A lot of people can't attend city council meetings. They may not have access to live streaming. We're providing an important service, and I stand by it. Ben, your thoughts on this again? Because it certainly is a different strategy from the mayor.
Well, okay, first of all, I would say that the 11 aldermen who voted no on that budget should be proud of their no votes. And they did it for different reasons. Ray Lopez had his particular reason. Byron Sigcho-Lopez, who will be in the studio in about an hour, had his reason. Some people did it because they felt that Lori Lightfoot did not provide enough funding for things like mental health clinics, did not come up with progressive forms of taxation, relying on the same old, like the property tax and so forth. So they had an ideological reason. Others, like Raylo, the alderman of the 15th Ward, were pointing out that they didn't think the budget was quote-unquote honest, and that the budget wasn't really balanced, and that at some point in the year, the mayor will be returning to them seeking new monies to pay off the obligations, because this budget is just based on a series of projections that are far too rosy. So I think that if you stand up to a mayor on transparency issues like Raylo, and if you stand up to a mayor on issues of how you spend money, like the Democratic Socialists, those are both justifiable reasons to stand up to a mayor. The people who went along with the mayor,
They have to defend their votes for, the rosy projections. And we discussed this on Tuesday with Brendan Riley saying all budgets are just projections anyway, so why should we vote no on this one just because it's the same old thing? Or you have to defend it and say we don't have money for mental health programs, expanding mental health programs, so we're just going to have to make do with what we have, like many of the sort of liberal alders, mainstream aldermen. So you have to defend it one way or another. My advice to absolutely anyone out there is not to believe the way Lori Lightfoot positions the vote on this budget on her website. Her website is intended to make it seem as though her budget is the greatest budget that was ever created in the history of the city of Chicago, and that anybody who voted against it was doing like a crime against the city. I would think that any voter who reads that has to see through the obvious propaganda of the appeal and realize that this is just a blatant political appeal by Lori Lightfoot to just win over support or intimidate people who vote against her. And you just didn't fall for it. I would hope most Chicagoans would see it that way. Listen, I've been disappointed by Chicagoans in the past. They've voted for mayors that I didn't think they should even be running. I'm thinking really now of Mayor Daley in 2007, after 4 of the most corrupt years the city of Chicago's ever experienced. I know that's saying a lot, and voters still overwhelmingly reelected him anyway. So it's voters have let me down in the city of Chicago, but I do believe, having said that most voters will see through this, and that this website that she set up is not. I think it does not reflect well on her. I think it's taking the democratic process and politicizing it. I believe that she should just respect people for having a different opinion and not try to punish them. She got her budget passed. She got her budget passed overwhelmingly. 39-11 is pretty overwhelming. So why are you tripping over the 11 people who voted no? But, on the other hand, I wouldn't say it's the end of the world. It's not like old man Daley back in the day when people would rise up to speak out and denounce him or criticize him. He would turn off their microphones in the city council. So, I think about this, D. I'm going to be writing a column. How have we progressed as a civilization over the last 10 years? It's the end of a decade. I can't believe it. This 10 years went so fast. So, when I say, well, all right, is it Mayor Daley turning off a person's microphone, an alderman's microphone, or sending in the sergeant at arms to force Dick Simpson to sit down in his chair and stop speaking, as opposed to Mayor Lori Lightfoot setting up a website that criticizes aldermen for daring to vote against her? I guess we're better off now than we were then. That was a little more forceful, a little more primitive and barbaric. But anyway, my recommendation to all citizens in the city of Chicago: do not fall for this website, okay?
So there you are. As far as our Illinois governor, no, by the way, he did not take my advice from yesterday's show, unless you were wondering. In case you were wondering, today J.B. Pritzker is at the Google Chicago office to attend Dream Hustle Code's annual Hour of Code.
What?
Yeah, that's what it says here.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, Dream Hustle?
Yeah. Dream Hustle Code's annual Hour of Code.
There's so much
So
stuff.
you're not going to that.
Yeah, and it just overwhelmed. All the things I don't know. Every day it's something else. I realize, like I discussed this earlier. Billie Eilish, didn't know who she was. So I'm sure pretty much everybody out there knows what Dream Hustle is. I don't know what it is. I didn't know what Series was. The bar in the Loop until Eddie Johnson Gate broke out, and then people were talking about Series. I never even heard of Series. Romana Hussain, my next guest, she knew about Series. How did she know about Series and I didn't know about Series? I just got to get out more. You know what I'm saying, D? So I never heard of Dream Hustle.
So yeah, J.B. Pritzker at the Google Chicago office today, and that's about all I got for the local news. Oh, damn. Ben, that tumbleweed's coming back. Watch out.
Hold on. I just want to talk about one news item that was in the Bright One today. Can I do that?
Yeah.
All right, before we take a break and bring Romana on. And I've been going on and on this week about how disappointed I am with the way a legalization of marijuana has been unfolding here in the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois over the last few weeks. And I based this a lot of great reporting by young Tommy Shuba here at the Sun-Times. And so my great criticism about the way the marijuana laws were enforced throughout the last, forever, is that basically black people got arrested for something that white people did all the time and never. So it was effectively illegal for white people and illegal for black people. That was at the top of the list of why I thought the laws against marijuana were so outrageous. That and the utter hypocrisy, the fact that people pretended as though there was something really weird about it when they were all doing it. So I just think it was symbolic of how people pretend, live in this make-pretend world and put up with injustices because, they're too scared to challenge them. Anyway, we now are legal, and what do I find? Almost every company that's got the right to sell legal reefer is some rich company owned by white people.
That's correct.
So, thank you, Robert Mueller. So, the thing was so unfair to black people when it was illegal, and now it's unfair to black people when it's legal. It's like nothing ever changes when it comes to reefer, and that's when I made my great pronouncement that I just want to make it illegal again. Just make it illegal again, but don't punish anybody. Nobody can get arrested for it. All right? That was my great recommendation.
I got a feeling it's going to be your next column.
Yes, it will be. I've kind of written it in my mind. Anyway, I was happy to see my hometown, my beloved Evanston, E-Town, had a vote. There was a story in today's Sun. I don't know if Romana edited it, but there's a story. You did? I didn't even know there was no pre-show in that one, D. I'm telling you, I did not know she edited it. Rejoicing over reparations vote. Danny Glover was in Evanston. Danny Glover, the great actor, and essentially the city of Evanston has decided they're going to give some of the proceeds of the 3% tax on cannabis sales. I love how they call it cannabis sales. Reefer, marijuana, pot, whatever you want to call it, will go somehow or other to the African American community in Evanston. They have to figure out how to try to make things right on stuff like redlining, predatory lending, the educational achievement gap, et cetera, and so forth. So it's like reefer reparations. How about that, D? Alliteration. Reefer reparations. So you know what? If it's good enough for Evanston, City of Chicago should try a little something like that before they open up all these reefer places on the Gold Coast that are run by these enormous wealthy companies that were looking the other way during all the years while black people were arrested for something white people were doing every day. So that's that's a good story that was in the Sun-Times today.
Get ready for that Ben Joravsky Chicago Reader column on that one in a few days. I know that's what that one's
I know it's coming,
about.
man. You know it's coming.
So there you are. Just like that, you're now in the know of what's on Ben's mind, I guess, with what's going on locally this week. And today on the program, we are going to be reading some of your questions on the YouTube live stream chat. Since it's kind of a slow news day, we figured, what the hell, we'll go to you. So, Brianna, we see your question. KMA, Barry, we see your question as well. Pat Rod, we're going to try and answer your questions today here on the show, so stick around for that. And also stick around because coming up after this break, Romana Hussain's with us. It's the Romana Rundown. Don't go anywhere. It's the Ben Joravsky Show live from the Chicago Sun-Times. The Ben Joravsky Show is supported by Northwestern University's part-time master's program in literature and liberal studies. Students learn from dynamic and diverse faculty as they build advanced skills for critical analysis, writing, and research. Evening classes are held on Northwestern's Evanston and Chicago campuses. The spring quarter application deadline is January 15th. Learn more at sps.northwestern.edu/masters.
Yay for our teachers! Yay for our teachers!
Read the Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan. Hey, commercial break's over. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Romana Hussain in the studio with me. Chicago Sun-Times editor comes in every Friday for the Romana Rundown. And Romana, you and I were on the same page this morning when I called you up for our pre-show prep, and I was saying, "What's on your mind?" And first thing out of your mouth was Richard Jewell, and I was thinking the same thing. Richard Jewell is the latest movie by Clint Eastwood. It's out this weekend in the city of Chicago. I think it may have been out last week, but whatever. It's definitely out this week. You can see it this weekend if you want. And it tells the story about a man who was falsely arrested and charged. Was he officially charged? I can't remember if he's officially charged.
I think he was, because they had his, I mean, we know who he was. His picture was all over the place, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's a good question. I think he was a suspect for a
He
while.
was a suspect.
But that question is whether he was charged or not.
Yeah, anyway, he was a suspect in the bombing out in Atlanta during the Olympics of 1996. Turned out it was a very shoddy case. There was no justification for it. Somebody else was convicted of that bombing, and so the man was really unfairly treated. And one of the reasons he was so unfairly treated is that the local newspaper officially put his name out there as a suspect in the case, and as a result, his life was turned upside down. So it was an example. I remember when this happened, Romana. I remember when it went down.
I do too. I was working at my first job at City News.
Okay,
Bureau.
so you were just in the journalism. So it was an example of newspapers, sort of the bad things that newspapers do. And as such, the reporters and the papers, in my humble opinion, it's fair game. They made this man's life miserable. They put his name in a paper when they shouldn't have. They deserve all the criticism they get. But somehow, some way, in the telling of this tale, in this movie, 20 years later, whatever it is, Romana Hussain, Clint Eastwood and the writer of the movie felt compelled to invent something about a woman reporter in the movie. Talk about it.
And there was the reporter that's portrayed in the movie. There actually was a reporter by that name, and her name was Kathy Scruggs, and she actually died in 2001. So she is long gone, but the character is named after her and is her. And in the movie, from what we've been hearing, is that they insinuate that she sleeps with the FBI agent who gives her the information. So she's kind of trading sex for information about the case, and that's how she finds out. Apparently, I don't know if that's how that goes from one to the other, but it's just the insinuation that she is sleeping with her source, and that's a common trope in a lot of Hollywood portrayals of female reporters, and it's kind of turned me off. I mean, I'll talk to you a little bit about within even the last 2 or 3 years, and even 5 years, where I've seen this, and I've almost wanted to not watch certain shows because I heard that this was how a female journalist was portrayed. And I don't know if you knew, but the actress Olivia Wilde, she is defending the portrayal of Kathy Scruggs and, her, sleeping with this FBI agent who is portrayed by John Hamm. She just put out a series of tweets actually yesterday, but I think she had a couple of tweets the day before. And I don't know if you knew, but Olivia Wilde is the daughter of 2 journalists, and she has an extended family full of journalists. So you would think that she would know better, but she's been going out there defending the portrayal. And I think the latest she said was it wasn't she didn't see the role as a trade, like, trading sex for information, but she said a pre-existing romantic relationship that this reporter had with this FBI agent, which I think is a pretty lame excuse. So I don't know if you watched House of Cards. I remember I didn't want to watch the show because someone told me I'd really like it, and then I remember reading all these articles when they had this one character named Zoe Barnes who ends up sleeping with, Kevin Spacey's character to get information. Mm-hmm. And I remember there was a lot of think pieces written about that. And then they talked about how there's previous, movies have had the same trope. There's this movie called Thank You for Smoking, same thing. And then even within the last year, I watched 2 movies, one that was set in present day. I mean, one was a series, and a movie that was like made in the early 80s. The movie that was made in the early 80s was Absence of Malice with Sally Field.
You saw that movie?
Yeah, because guess why? My husband made me watch it.
That movie was way before your time.
I would never have picked that movie. But my husband
and her husband
like
is one of the few people in America, other than me, who still gets Netflix discs through the mail.
Yeah, he binge watches Cheers, so just to show you. I try to binge watch.
I binge watch Cheers. I can't.
I'm not saying it's a bad show, but I'm just saying he tends to watch a lot of retro things. So he wanted to watch
Cheers.
I love that damn mailman.
Where everybody knew. Is that Cheers or Friends? Oh, thank you. Okay,
no,
good.
Norm. You know, Norm actually used to work at City News Bureau.
Oh,
so he's from Chicago.
did
So
not
I
know
remember
that.
when I worked at City News, people are like, "Oh, you know Norm from Cheers." He was what's his name? The act George Wendt. I think he came to like one of the City News parties once, like a reunion party. So it's pretty.
I knew he did Second City. I didn't know he did that.
I have ties to everybody here. So,
Absolutely.
So anyway, when we watched Absence of Malice, Paul Newman's in it and Sally Field, and she sleeps with the she's doing this investigative piece on this guy, and of course she ends up sleeping with him. And he slaps her around at one point too, and I was like, what the hell? So I remember being annoyed. So I know it's supposed to be a great movie.
Wait,
but
time
that
out.
just like
Did Paul Newman slap Sally Field?
Yeah.
Was it the Paul Newman character?
yeah.
Okay, let's just. You're in a riff here, but let's just talk about that for a while. See, I saw Absent of Malice in real time back in the 1980s.
And you probably thought it was great.
Did I? Well, I love Paul Newman. It's true. The one I really love.
Or he roughed her up.
He roughed her up. Does he actually hit her?
He like hits her or like kind of like rips her clothes off or something like that.
Well,
like,
here's
in
the
a mean like
Here's the movie that I think is great and that had a huge impact on me. But there is this moment in it where it's roughing up, and I wonder about this. Chinatown.
Oh yeah, I saw that too.
Where Jack Nicholson.
That's another movie that made me watch.
Yeah. Poor Romana's got to watch all these. But Jack Nicholson slaps around the Faye Dunaway character, and I was like, why? You know. But that was a thing. Like Jack Nicholson characters were doing in the 70s, slapping women, and I don't remember the Paul Newman movie Absence of Malice that much. Just bizarre that all these years later.
Yeah, I guess when you're a woman, you're like cringe, and when you watch it in 2019,
and he actually hit her.
Well, I think he just like pushes her down, like he's annoyed with her, and of course they still get together, or they're like still like lovey-dovey in like a scene later. So it's
she
just
forgives him.
Yeah, and I don't know. It's very bothersome as someone who's a female journalist. Watching these characters. And then there was another series that I watched, Sharp Objects, and this is a show, it was an HBO series that came out last year and is really popular. And why am I forgetting the name of the actress? She's a very famous actress. But anyway, the actress in there plays Amy Adams. She's in there and she plays a journalist, and she goes back to her small town to work on this like murder mystery of this young woman, and they're just trying to show this like gothic southern town, and anyway, she ends up sleeping with the police officer who's investigating the case and some guy that is a suspect in the murder. It was a good show. It was critically acclaimed, but just again, this is a show that's written by the same author who wrote Gone Girl, who's Chicago based, and I just felt like, again, it's the same trope over and over again. Whenever you see a female journalist in Hollywood, I kind of brace myself because you don't know what's going to happen next.
So what do you think's going on here?
Spotlight actually had a good portrayal because the female journalist on the investigative team was portrayed just like the men were.
Yeah, they were just
reporters.
Reporters.
And
kind of frumpy reporters.
Yeah, and you heard about that too, about how like there's a whole article about how they made the reporters wear really bad clothes to look like actual print reporters, and there were some clothes that the actors are like, I'm not wearing that.
Well, this is another Romana.
Well, we
and
can
Ben.
talk about that.
We'll talk about.
I think female journalists dress better than male journalists. Sorry, I am married to a male print journalist.
Wait, time out.
I know a lot of men
Look
get
at
offended.
the two guys in the room with you.
Hey, I got a collar on my shirt.
Yeah.
I mean, You
Some
know,
guys dress better than others.
yes, that's
but-
true. In fact, there's a couple reporters here at the Bright One that I see walking around. "Oh, you're looking good today. You know?
they're probably all the younger ones. All the guys who are my age don't dress
Mark
well.
Brown is a
Yeah,
pretty
he is.
sharp dresser.
Yeah,
Let's
he
give
is.
him credit. Show some love for Mark Brown's clothes. But all right, well, wait. Before we get into the frumpy, poorly
There'll
dressed
be a ton of reporters barging in the door. Hey,
Tommy Shuba, who we're huge fans of here,
He's a millennial. The
He's a
guy,
millennial.
the younger
he dresses
guys.
even worse than I do.
Well, yeah, that's true. Some of them dress better. I mean, there's some guys that are my age, I guess, but in general, I mean, I've told my husband that too. He's a male print reporter. They don't even try. That's a problem. And it's like, so whenever they show these movies where the women are like, oh, all like drooling all over these like male reporters, I'm like, what planet are they on?
Yeah.
You know, so like, I'm married to reporters, so
Wait, so Romana,
I overlooked that. So
this is okay. Now we're on a
Okay,
tangent
sorry,
within a
sorry,
tangent,
sorry.
but I like this tangent. And this
no. But so let's go back. So
Yeah.
I just feel like whenever there's male journalists who are portrayed, and you know, this profession is not really that kind to women. We all talk about, and I've had this discussion with my husband as well. We all talk about, and we criticize other entities for treating, women and minorities differently, or like there's a lot of inequality in journalism, especially with women and people of color. And it takes a lot for us to be taken seriously, and for that trope to be thrown out over and over again is just kind of offensive.
And what do you think the devastating impact of that trope is? In movie after movie?
It's like even for like sources to think that you're like that, And if anything, I think female journalists have to deal with a lot of gross men. And I mean, all of us have stories about that, So, or just like the presumption, this is how we get information. And not to say that journalists are unethical or have been unethical. I think this movie is kind of, I guess they're supposed to be espousing on that, but nobody's saying that we make mistakes. I think the Atlantic Journal-Constitution, they want a disclaimer on the movie because they feel like this woman's being libeled. She's not here to defend herself. She's gone. She's dead, and they're saying that journalists do make mistakes, and I don't think any journalist will tell you other. But to insinuate that's the way a lot of female journalists get information is just, it's so damaging.
Well,
is
like
so
I
damaging.
said, this is a movie that's dedicated to portraying how the media can lose control of itself on a sensational story and ruin a man's reputation or ruin anybody's reputation by getting way out in front of something and then falsely accusing or allowing a man to be falsely accused of a crime he did not commit. And then, okay, in the aftermath, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
The headline's already done. People have their thoughts, already talking about this guy. How do you make him right on that one? And so the movie is a very powerful indictment about that. But in the telling of the movie, you make up some stuff about this woman reporter. So it's like, couldn't you just make the movie without making up the stuff?
Exactly. So like you're saying that the media libeled this guy, and then you're libeling this actual journalist. It's not even a fictional character. I guess you can argue in all these other shows that or in movies I talked about, they're all fictional characters. Maybe not in Spotlight, but House of Cards, Sharp Objects, Absence of Malice, all fictional characters. But this is an actual woman that was the reporter that revealed that Richard Jewell was a suspect.
Yeah.
That's I just Googled his name. I don't know if he ever was charged.
No, I don't think he was charged, but he was brought in for questioning.
Yeah.
I remember when this went down, the 96 Atlanta Olympics. That's the one where Muhammad Ali lit the flame. I was obsessed with another story off of that, but I'll hold back on that. Anyway.
I remember the women's gymnastics team.
Of the 96?
Yeah, because remember that one young woman did
I can't
was on
remember
the
her
balance
name.
God.
I can remember like a lot of other names, but not her name. I remember Dominique Mucciano.
Oh yeah, I remember her too.
From 96?
Yeah.
Anyways, but then there was the bomb, and it turned out it was Eric Rudolph,
Yeah.
who was a terrorist who was bombing abortion clinics, a lunatic.
Yeah.
And he did it, not Richard Jewell. But where the paper went wrong was they put Richard Jewell's name in.
Yeah.
And newspapers are bending over backwards. And in this day and age, it's hard, because some outlet will say, we're protecting the name of a suspect because they haven't been officially charged. And I remember I get this email. It gets weird emails. You probably get them all the time, too, from readers. And some reader was chiding me for not using the name of one of the women who was implicated in Eddygate. All right, and they
we chose not to use this woman's name.
I didn't even know the name because I was relying on the Sun-Times and the Tribune's coverage. So you didn't put it in. I didn't read it. If she hasn't been charged, I don't know why her name should be put out there. I stand by that. It's the same principle with Richard Jewell. I think that's a good principle to follow.
I agree. If someone hasn't been charged with a crime, why put their name out there?
Yeah.
And then, you always have to remember when someone's charged, they're not convicted. And there are many instances where someone's charged and they end up, we do stories on them and they end up being acquitted. And by the time, the case goes through trial, like nobody cares about the case much anymore. I'm just saying that, even when someone's charged, that doesn't mean that they're guilty. That's one thing you have to remember. But when they're charged, they're fair game, I think.
But this thing about the women reporters being always attracted to the man, it gets into a larger story. I struggle with this one. This is one of my pet peeves. A guy can look like anything.
Oh, that is
anything.
Everyone. Yeah. And I think that makes a lot of dorks think.
Well, it
gives confidence to a lot of guys.
What was that movie I love? Chef.
Oh
yeah, you told me about
Chef.
That. Yeah.
But Chef, the guy is what's Favreau? He looks even worse than I do. And all these beautiful women are lined up. I'm like, come on, man.
I think that's because a male director is making the movie.
So it's his fantasy.
Yeah,
Scarlett Johansson was in it.
Scarlett Johansson.
It's like Woody Allen. It's my Woody Allen theory. Like all these men talk about how great Woody Allen is. I'm like, most women, 90% of the women look at Woody Allen and think gross.
That is actually not. That may be true now, but back in the day,
because he was Woody Allen. But if he was a regular guy walking down the street and didn't have millions of dollars,
you're talking about they say, okay, you're
and
when they say
portraying
gross,
himself in the mirror.
Okay, yeah.
I'm just saying they would look at him and be like, ugh. I'm just saying.
Like, I'm a little on the fence. What's his name? Woody. I'm out.
The Woodman. Now nobody will go anywhere near Woody Allen, which is fair game. But anyway,
Carrie Strug. Because remember Bella Caroli was like, "Come on, Carrie," and
this guy
has the internet right in his face.
I thought it was like he knows so much about the '90s.
You're like 2 years old.
Ask him who was in Martin, the stars of the TV show Martin. He could tell you the whole cast.
Yeah. I remember that show.
Yeah, but he could
tell you. That was my favorite show growing up.
I
still watch Martin to this day.
All right. So anyway,
Okay.
I'm with you 100%. And
I don't want to watch that.
Yeah, I know. And now you're not. And then here's the deal. We had this conversation on the phone. I am a big fan of Clint Eastwood. Have always been. I overlook his Republican leanings, and like his movies have messages that he conveys, and it's really weird, and this is so emblematic of our time. Just follow me on this one. I've watched every Clint Eastwood movie pretty much.
Did you like Gran Torino?
Love Gran Torino.
That movie made me laugh.
But anyway, so you go back to Dirty Harry. In Dirty Harry, I don't know if you ever saw.
I never saw it, but I know
your husband will make you watch it. So in Dirty Harry, there's a rapist out there, a serial murderer. I think he's a murderer too. Yeah, and Clint Eastwood's cop is like the constitutional protections that we have the constitutional guarantees we have to protect suspects have to be thrown out the window because there's a rapist here. Fast forward. Okay, so liberals in that movie are mocked and maligned as do-gooders who would expose the public to all kinds of criminals because they have these highfalutin attachments to these constitutional protections, okay? Fast forward to 2018, 2019, Donald John Trump is in trouble because he breaks every law, he lies every time. Suddenly, Republicans are concerned about due process rights when it's Republicans under trouble. They're worried about due process rights. So what does Clint Eastwood come out with? A movie that says it's unfair the way the criminal justice system treated Richard Jewell. Well, the media and the criminal justice system treated Richard Jewell, that you have rights, you have constitutional care. So that's funny, when back in the 70s he was making fun of So I have my issues with Clint Eastwood's politics.
I feel like I haven't seen a Clint Eastwood movie in a long time.
You just saw Gran Torino. That wasn't that long ago.
That was the last movie I think I saw by him, and that made me laugh.
You didn't see Sully?
No.
Well, Sully was a libertarian movie. In Sully, Tom Hanks plays a pilot who saves the lives of all the people on his plane with a very brave landing in the Hudson Bay, I want to say, or East River, wherever it was. Hudson River, I can't remember which river it was. Anyway, the point is, he's interrogated by these bureaucrats with the federal government. How dare they question this great individual, which total exaggeration, by the way. I actually read Sully's book, the book that the movie's based on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so he used that event to make an attack against government, an anti-government movie. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So sure. I'm not with his politics.
No, but I love
movies.
$1 Million Baby, and was it Unforgiven with Morgan?
Well, you're really going back in time.
Yeah.
You weren't even.
No, I was alive.
That was like adult. A 70s movie, wasn't it?
No. That was like 90s or early.
Is that what? A 90s? Yeah, maybe you're right.
But I remember I did like $1 Million Baby. I like some of his movies. I'm not saying I wouldn't, but I don't want to see this Richard Jewell movie just because of that.
Well,
and just because the actress is like saying like defending it. And when you have parents who are journalists, I think you have some integrity.
Well, she's got to promote the movie.
She's the same person. I know she directed our favorite movie, Booksmart.
She directed Booksmart?
That actress, yeah. So that made me like.
That was not my favorite.
It was not
movie.
my favorite either.
Yeah,
so.
I didn't like you were being facetious. I didn't like Booksmart at all.
I didn't either.
All right, now let's talk about Dorothy Brown's case. This has been on my mind, and Dorothy Brown, of course, is the clerk of the circuit court, outgoing clerk of the circuit court. There has been investigations into job selling and allegations into in her office forever. And Romana, this is one of my pet peeves. It's always the little people that go to jail or prison, and it seems like the big people don't get caught. Somehow or other, Dorothy Brown, and I read today's story in the Sun-Times, very good story about the sentencing of an employee in Dorothy Brown's office named Beena Patel. And according to the story written by John Seidel, the federal court reporter for the Sun-Times, Beena Patel was the person who took the money that was being forwarded to Dorothy Brown's businesses or her husband's businesses for someone who wanted a job in the office. And she's going to prison for lying about taking the money.
Yeah, perjury, because they said that she was basically thwarting the investigation by lying to a federal grand jury. And there's already another man that was charged in relation to this case for the same reasons, but he was given probation. And Beena Patel was given 2 years in prison. No, sorry, the other guy was given probation. She was given 2 years in prison. And I don't know if you saw what the judge said, but the judge basically said there's one person. She noted that there's one person who's not here. And then she said that is Dorothy Brown. I don't know if she said Dorothy Brown, but then she said, quote, "For some reason you made a decision to lie and protect her, and she's not here to help you when you need her." I thought that was pretty interesting. And it's interesting because Dorothy Brown's office has been investigated since 2014. It's been quite a while. I was surprised when I saw that. I thought it was just like maybe 3 years, but it's been 5 years. Yeah, not that 3 or 5 years is such a difference, but I don't know. It's pretty interesting. I don't know. We still don't know what's going to happen to Dorothy Brown. We still are waiting for the results of that investigation, correct?
Yeah. Well,
so you don't know what's going to happen to her. So you're just saying that you think she's going to get a slap on the wrist, or
I don't know if anything's going to happen. It's just
Patel shouldn't have gotten anything.
Well, I think about this a lot. I talked about this before you got here about Eddie Gate and the things that Eddie Johnson, that people get fired over. And now I look at this. This really reminds me of Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen was Donald Trump's lawyer. He's in prison. I don't know if you saw this, but he had an appeal to the judge. he wants leniency, and he realizes that he threw his life away by dedicating his life to Donald Trump. Thought he was cool hanging out with Donald Trump and being his bag man or whatever he was, his enforcer. And so in the case of Bina Patel, the way the story is written in the Sun-Times as they lay it out, Patel accepted a quote-unquote bribe from this employee, taking $10,000 in cash he brought to the Sabre Room in an envelope full of $5,000 cash at the corner bakery across from the Daily Center, and the money then went to a business owned by Brown and her husband. So Patel takes the money. The money ends up not with Patel. She didn't take the money. She didn't keep the money.
She delivered.
She's the deliverer.
Yeah.
So the person who delivers the money is going to prison for lying to federal investigators about delivering the money. And the person on whose behalf apparently the money was delivered is just hasn't been indicted or anything.
No, it's maybe they're building their case. I don't know. I'm just trying to be devil's advocate here. I just don't know what's taking so long.
No, taking a long time.
Yeah, so
Good
I
God.
don't know. I mean, what's going to happen? Meanwhile, Dorothy Brown's, eating cake with her face on it, and she got reelected in 2016, even despite the investigation. So it's interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
it's just I don't know. It seems like this happens so many times. It's just the investigators, they're working their way up, and then they just kind of run out of gas or run out of steam. They don't have a case. They're worried about going after powerful people. I see this going on with Donald Trump right now, and then they'll just settle with the Michael Cohens and Bina Patels of the world.
Yeah.
Go to federal prison. But I'll tell you this, that judge was absolutely correct, Judge Sarah Ellis. She was telling Bina Patel in so many words what Michael Cohen is coming to the realization, and that is when you do the dirty work for some powerful person, more often than not, they're not going to be there for you when you face the consequences.
Nope.
And
And this woman seemed like she was pretty dedicated, Dorothy Brown. Then she also had a picture of the judge on her nightstand. That's what it said in the story. It's kind of interesting. And she just said that it's been held for her every day. So
yeah. Anyway,
she seemed remorseful.
Yeah, as she heads off to federal prison.
I know.
Everybody's remorseful as they head off to federal prison. All right.
I guess you have to be.
All right. I need your thoughts and reflections on our president, Donald John Trump. Last week, we had a discussion about whether we hate certain politicians. It was a very fun discussion to have with you. And Donald Trump seems to violate all kinds of standards of acceptable behavior.
And to recap last week, for those who didn't listen, you don't hate Donald Trump, right?
Or Rahm Emanuel.
Or Rahm Emanuel.
You don't hate anyone.
No, that's not true. That's actually not. Remember, we had that discussion. Okay.
Well, who do you hate?
I hated Hitler.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, remember I said there's like there's Hitler over here.
Ben
all right?
remembers something. Whoa.
And then there's like Trump over here. I think there's a gap between Trump and Hitler. Would you not agree with me on that one?
No comment.
No comment?
I'm not commenting.
Okay, let me say this. I think there's a big gap between Rahm Emanuel and Hitler. You will agree with that, will you not? Okay, all right.
I won't comment on the other thing, but I agree on Rahm and Hitler.
I mean, listen, I have my problems with the way Rahm Emanuel ran the city of Chicago, but in a million...
Take a chill pill, man.
Thank you, Rahm. In a million years, I would never compare him to Hitler. So, that's hate. That's what you gotta... I always feel hate should be reserved for people that you really hate.
Just wanted to make sure our listeners had the recap of last week.
Okay, but it was a delightful conversation, and then I repeated it over the weekend so many times. I think people were talking to me about, don't you hate this one, and don't you... And, and sometimes I'll say, like, when LeBron James, I remember, went to the Miami Heat, and this is 2010, he created that super team, and the Bulls didn't get him. I know that this is getting mad. Don't talk Bulls.
Ramp it up, buddy.
People
Come
are
on.
saying, I hate LeBron James, and I felt bad about that. You know what I'm saying? I don't really hate LeBron James. Anyway, so Donald Trump, man, he has lost his mind. Talk about this one.
So young Greta Thunberg, I could be mispronouncing her name because she's Swiss, so she probably pronounces it totally different, right? Isn't she Swiss or is she Swedish? I don't know. Anyway, she's a young woman. She's
16.
She's a young girl who is a climate change She speaks, advocate, and just basically telling us about the things that we can, she's been talking to different people. She's addressed the UN. She was named Person of the Year by Time Magazine. And Donald Trump, who was so clearly jealous that this young woman was named Person of the Year, started tweeting and said that Greta must work on her anger management problem, then go to a good old-fashioned movie with a friend. Chill, Greta, chill. And, this young woman has Asperger's syndrome. So she's, I think you would say that she was on the spectrum. So, her mannerisms are a little, different. Obviously, a lot of people, the way she addresses or talks about climate change can be very, very passionate. And I don't know what people with this syndrome, like what sort of symptoms they have, but she's this young woman who gets this award and he seems jealous. And what's interesting is that Melania Trump, her whole, she's a anti-bullying advocate. And just last week, Byron Trump, who's the son that she has with Donald Trump, his name was brought up. Byron Trump's name was brought up during the impeachment hearings, and Melania Trump was very mad. And her campaign is called Be Best. It's like an anti-bullying campaign. So of course, as a parent, I can understand. As Byron's parent, I can understand her, frustrations. But she's supposed to be an anti-bullying advocate, and she was kind of silent about, her husband going after the 16-year-old girl. Byron Trump is now 13. So, Maxine Waters even tweeted to Melania, tell your husband to be best and enroll. And she said, why did he enroll himself in anger management? And I think the White House just released a statement a few minutes ago, right before I came in here. And they said something like, Melania and Donald Trump, communicate differently. And then it is something like her son is but Byron Trump is not an activist who goes around giving speeches about climate change. She's a 13-year-old who wants and deserves privacy. So what is that supposed to mean? Like there's two different standards for kids. If this kid is talking about climate change and, she's like fair game, it's interesting. It's like
that's what they're saying. Yeah.
You're this like man that could be your great grandfather and you're going after this young woman. It's young girl. I should even say she's not even a woman, she's not an adult.
No, the standards are so low, have fallen so much. And, I see Democrats right now are freaking out. There's a lot of articles out there that Democrats are freaking out because they were so worried that Donald Trump will be reelected. Everybody realizes that he will be acquitted by the Senate. There's no way they're going to vote to impeach him. We all know that, and that somehow or other he'll roll to victory again, even if he loses by more votes because of this crazy electoral system. So Democrats are freaking out, and what I like to point out is that I think that with Trump, his standards of behavior is so wretched. When he does things like this, like when he makes this ad hominem attack on a 16-year-old who has raised critical issues. I mean, so you could deal, if you want to address the issues, whether Donald Trump apparently thinks climate change is a hoax, it's not real. Even as the ice caps are melting, even as like water is rising into Miami, and so he thinks it's a hoax. So okay, you could deal with the issue of climate change, but this attack on anybody who dares to disagree with him or to call him out,
let alone a teenager.
And I think that most presidents in the past would have restrained themselves, no matter what they felt privately, what they said in the confines of the White House. They would have restrained themselves. They wouldn't have said it publicly. And I have to believe, I keep saying this, Romana, and many of my Democratic friends say, no, Ben, you're deluded. But I have to believe that just like a majority of voters in the states, the key states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania will not tolerate this behavior and will vote against it. And that, I think, will ultimately drive Donald Trump from office. I could see by the look of utter skepticism on your face that you have no faith whatsoever in the voters.
I think some people really, I think the people that voted for him still don't think he's does anything wrong. They hear something like this and they said that he's telling it like it is. Yeah. And there has been criticism about Greta Thunberg. Like I I'm someone who believes in climate change. I can say that. But one of the things, like, I know a lot of people say, well, there's so many young kids who are doing things. She's not the only one. Why does she get, like, there's so many kids of color, like, and there's been a lot of articles about this, like, why aren't they getting the same attention? And she does come up from a place of privilege. So she's talking about, like, oh, she takes a boat all the way from, wherever she lives to New York. And I'm like, yeah, you're able to do that, so not because she's against plane travel. So it's like she's like, I think her parents are like, her mom's an opera singer, her dad, I don't know, but she's privileged. So it's like, yeah, it's very easy for you to take a boat because you can do that. But so that's some of my, not criticism, but I'm like, yeah, it's easy when you have that access. But at the same time, climate change, he's talking about, most 99.9% of the stuff, or 100% of the stuff she's saying is not, it's based in truth, and she has like legitimate points. And for Donald Trump to get, I feel like he's just jealous because this young girl is on the cover of Time magazine and he's not.
There's probably a lot of that going on,
you know what I
too.
mean? It's like he gets so jealous.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just, it's like, and this is the leader of our country. Like, he's so worried about who's on the cover of Time magazine.
And that's why I'm saying,
it's like, don't you have
yeah.
other problems to deal with or other issues to deal with, like running the nation, than worrying about who's on the cover of Time magazine? I mean, does he, like, I don't know, does he go through the magazines and tries to find out whether he's on the cover or not? And then
yeah, that's still a gripe. I think he was really mad that he wasn't Newsman of the Year one year at Time magazine. He's still mad about that one. Anyway, Romana was saying before I let you out the door, your recommendation, what are you going to watch?
I don't know if I haven't really watched. What movies were released this weekend? I know the Richard Jewell. Yeah, and I've been hearing a lot of stuff about Bombshell.
Yeah, I'm
are you going to see that? I don't know. I have conflicted feelings about that as well.
Has that come out yet?
No, it's going to come out Christmas
movie.
But yeah, anyway, I know you talked about you started watching the.
I started watching Mrs. Maisel. Yeah,
Ms.
and
what do you think? A lot of women like it, so my friends told me to start it.
I love the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, but I'm watching it and I realize it's. I just don't think it's for everybody out there. So
I
hesitate to.
What does that mean? Is it just for girls, women?
No,
chicks?
Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. It's set in the late 50s. It deals with Lenny Bruce and
she's a female comedian.
Comedians, and the family is eccentric and it's bizarre, and they break into song and dance at the drop of a hat. I love it. It's my cup of tea.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna say, "Oh, it's so weird," because you made it sound
no,
weird.
But I mean, I'm when I say all these things, I'm thinking I don't know who. I think it's more a reflection of my peculiarities that I like. Like there's the opening segment of season 3. There's a USO show, and it goes on for like a half an hour.
Oh no!
And I'm like, I enjoyed it. I loved it, but I'm like, dang, how'd this lady get this show made? That, you know what I mean? It's just, we're gonna do it
for half an hour, really?
Maybe. Well, but they keep cutting back to it, so they show the dancers.
Is it just music?
They show Mrs. Maisel does a comedy routine, and there's the dancers that come out and dance, and then there's a singer who comes out and sings. I think
so they show the whole thing.
Yeah, but they cut. It's not like a half hour full chunk. They cut back to it constantly. So if you add up all the time, and I enjoyed it, and. So anyway, listen, I'm hesitant to say run, don't walk to watch the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
I do want to watch it. I do want to watch it. I will try to watch it, but you're not. And I saw A Marriage Story last week.
Not feeling A Marriage Story. I'm not running or walking to see that one.
You can watch on Netflix. You don't have to run or walk. You can
That's
just sit
true. I can waddle down to Netflix. Waddle down to Netflix. Anyway, Romana Hussain, thank you so much. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. All right. Very good. That's Romana Hussain. I'm Ben Joravsky. We'll be right back after this.
Hey, everybody. What you're about to hear are the piano stylings of Jeff Manuel. Man, listen to Jeff go. Jeff Manuel has been playing piano around Chicago for years. He's played for conventions, for celebrities, played in basement bars with blues bands. He's played at prestigious social clubs, fine restaurants, and in the intimacy of private homes. Book Jeff Manuel at jeffemanuelpianist.com. Don't worry, I'll spell his name at the end of this commercial. You know what Chicago Magazine said?
They said that Jeff Manuel is, quote, as comfortable with Chopin as he is with Cole Porter. He's excellent and his performance is joyous. He offers an elegant stream of compositions and interpretations that entertains the mind but won't hurt the ears. To hear more of Jeff Manuel's work and to book Jeff for your next event, go to jeffmanuelpianist.com. I'm going to spell it out for you, people. J-E-F-F, M as in Mary, A, N as in Nancy, UELPIANIST.com. Take it away, Jeff Manuel. Did you know that 40% of the people in Illinois opt to be cremated? Well, it's true. And Chicagoland Cremation Options honors their wishes by providing cremation services directly to the general public. Chicagoland Cremation Options provides an affordable, ethical, and easy cremation arrangement, whether in person or online. Save thousands and streamline the process by going directly to Chicagoland Cremation Options. It's a family-owned business operated by my good friend, Douglas Klein. Here's how you reach them. ChicagolandCremationOptions.com. One more time, ChicagolandCremationOptions.com.
It's Chicagoland's adult entertainment playground. It's the world-famous Admiral Theater, 3940 West Lawrence Avenue. The Admiral is homegrown from Chicago, and it's the most conveniently located club in all of the city. 15 minutes from the O'Hare Airport in downtown Chicago Loop. Voted Chicago's best strip club, the Admiral has showgirls galore and a variety of adult entertainment shows. The world-famous Admiral Theater, open every day from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m., 3940 West Lawrence Avenue. For events, showtime, and other information, visit AdmiralX.com. Must be 18 years of age or older to enter.
The Ben Joravsky Show is supported by Northwestern University's part-time master's program in literature and liberal studies. Students learn from dynamic and diverse faculty as they build advanced skills for critical analysis, writing, and research. Evening classes are held on Northwestern's Evanston and Chicago campuses. The spring quarter application deadline is January 15th. Learn more at sps.northwestern.edu/masters. Hey everybody, how's it going? It's me, Dennis, producer of the Ben Joravsky Show. Ben's grabbing our guest, Byron Sigcho-Lopez. We strategized and decided it'd be best that he go do it while I talk to all of you listening on the YouTube live stream chat. Very great conversation we're having today on the YouTube live stream chat. Even you, PC Amnesty, glad you're joining us. With middle finger as a profile pic. That's kind of awesome. If you have any questions that you would like to ask us here on the show, we would love to answer them here. We'll do it before we get out of here. Any questions at all, feel free to weigh in. If you're listening on the YouTube live stream chat, just hang tight with us. Ben's grabbing Byron Sigcho-Lopez, the newly elected alderman, a very progressive man. Our progressive listeners will be big fans of that. That's not you, PC Amnesty. Am I right, bud? But hey, keep listening. Hang tight. We'll be right back. The Ben Joravsky Show. Hour number 2 is moments away.
Well, it's unfortunate, and our team is back at the table, and I know at least a portion of the bargaining team is there. It's unfortunate that the larger bargaining team has decided that they're going to take the day off. There should be a sense of urgency all the way around, and I'm never going to shy away from publicizing to the union and also to the public the hardships that our students and our families are facing. Look, I'm a kid who grew up really trying to take advantage of all the opportunities that my public school education gave me, and one of which was participating in athletics. I was never going to go on to the next level, but they were important to me.
It's the butter cow, which has 9 hearts to represent the 9 essential nutrients in milk. That's right, it's made entirely out of butter, and it's a state fair tradition since at least 1922.
Yeah, spread your.
All right, everybody, we're back. Hey, let's give a round of applause. Our guests made it.
Our guest made it, and I went and got him. All right? Several hats on the Ben Joravsky Show.
You're good. That was good guest grabbing, by the way.
Thank you.
Eat your heart out, Miles. All right, hour number 2 of your Ben Joravsky Show for, Friday, December 13th. It's Friday the 13th. Hour number 2 is moments away, but before we get into that, we need to thank the following unions for jumping on board and sponsoring this program. First up, it's the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, not Aerosmith, Local 126 and District 8, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, and the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150. A giant thank you to those unions for jumping on board and sponsoring this program. And, of course, today's Ben Joravsky Show was brought to you by our dear friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. Hour number 2, let's go. It is Friday, December 13th, and live from the Chicago Sun-Times Chicago Reader Studio on Racine Avenue, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. In this hour of the program, it's the alderman of the Ben what ward?
25th.
Oh, he knows them all. 25th Ward Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez and Loreen Targos. And now your host, Alderman of no ward. He's not an alderman. Chicago Reader columnist Ben Joravsky.
I am not an alderman, but I talk to aldermen all the time. Byron Sigcho-Lopez of the 25th Ward, Loreen Targos of the 25th Ward as well, and also of the environmental movement. So, first of all, welcome back. Welcome back, Cotter. You guys have been on the show before, both of you. I think, actually, Loreen, you've been on the show more times. This is your 3rd time, I want to say, right? Do I have that correct?
Yeah, 3rd time.
All right, so before we go and start asking questions and getting our conversation, let's do that disclaimer that I feel compelled to do whenever any EPA employee comes on the show. We live in a very difficult time, and I don't really trust Donald John Trump to do the right thing with the First Amendment rights of federal employees. So let's just get that out of the way right up front.
You are right to not trust that. Keep it accountable. So I'm off the clock and here as a member of AFGE Local 704, a union representing the employees of the Region 5 EPA.
That's correct.
All right, thank you, Robert Mueller. And you are also, you're not the chief of staff, but you're...
I'm the best friend of the alderman of the 25th
best friend
Ward.
of the alderman of the 25th Ward. So, all right. So we're going to do a little EPA talk, and we're going to do a little city talk, a lot of city talk, and some national political talk as well, Byron. Byron is sort of the lefty persuasion in the Chicago City Council. And are you for Bernie?
Yes,
You're
I'm
Bernie.
officially endorsed
You've already endorsed
Bernie,
Bernie.
yeah.
Okay, we'll do a little Bernie Hillary talk. I can't get enough of that. And just in general, the national politics. But before we to take all those enter discussion into to those areas, I just have to ask you about what's the latest with the EPA. The last time you were on the show, or maybe 2 times down, we were talking about. I wrote an article about it as well, about some act of civil disobedience that you did at an award ceremony. That where you were given an honor for some work that you've done as an EPA analyst, and so what's just update people on what's going on with the EPA cuts in the Environmental Protection Agency and the impact they're having on our efforts to protect the environment.
So the administrator has agreed to go back to the table with the union. So on January 7th, we will be going back to negotiating. And right now, we're kind of internally mobilizing and organizing to make sure that our rank and file workers have a strong voice in those negotiations, and we can really lead with getting some, concessions so that we can do our jobs and promote public health in the environment.
Is the Trump administration still cutting the ranks of the EPA, or are they starting to hire people? Are they taking a little more seriously the obligations they have to protect the environment?
There were some recent articles that came out that were very critical of the agency. We are at an all-time low. I think we have, in 2010, Region 5 had 1,250, so 1,250 workers. We are down to around 900. The administration's been blaming that on a very high retirement eligible workers at the agency, which is true, but that's because of a generation of not hiring and always Republican opposition to hiring at the EPA. And so now they are doing some hiring and they're kind of keeping even, but it's still at an all-time low. And, we want to make sure that, part of this contract negotiation is to make sure that we have an agency that attracts the scientists and engineers and lawyers and workers who want to serve the public good.
Mm-hmm. I talk about this all the time on the show. I just had a conversation, a similar vein, before you got here. I have a hard time believing that a majority of Americans are going to support the Trump agenda when it comes to the environment. And put aside whether Americans are as far left as I am, or Byron is, or Bernie is, I do believe that most voters in this country appreciate the notion that the Environmental Protection Agency is here to protect the environment, as the name would say, and that I have a hard time believing that the people of this country, majority of the people, let's say in the Great Lakes region, Wisconsin and Michigan, where there's so much potential pollution of the key lakes, Lake Michigan, would support the gutting of the EPA, would support like allowing the EPA to lose its environmental protection efficiency through attrition. You just described attrition. Mm-hmm. Somebody retires, you don't replace them. That's right. That's no excuse for, exactly. Well, we're not firing people, we're just not replacing them when they retire. Well, that's no excuse. Mm-hmm. So that's my sense of it. You deal with the public a lot. What's your sense of how the public is reacting to this?
I think we need to do a better job of empowering our members to be more talking to their communities and really empowering communities and connecting them with how to support us. We need to do better with because we are this diluted impact. So if we're doing our job right, you never hear from us, and we need to do better with community engagement and strengthening our union as part of that. Being proud and vocal union members and knowing that our union has our back and we have their back, and in terms of helping everybody, our agency, we are there doing the work, and the community members, we need to be engaging with that. On the Southwest side, we've been doing some environmental justice work, and I'd love to see that play out more across the nation, because we're not just, EPA employees. We are also members of community organizations. We are parents. We are, we need to wear all the hats all the time and be in conversation with our communities.
All right, we'll shift the focus a little bit to the local level and just staying with the environment. Byron, in your opinion, you've been an alderman now for, how long has it been? About 6 months now. How is the city doing on the environmental front in terms of protecting the environment right here in the city of Chicago?
And thank you again, Ben. It's a pleasure to be here with you and Dennis, first of all, and be back again to speak those inconvenient truths sometimes that happen often, unfortunately, still in city council. In terms of the environmental aspect, we still have a big debt, with our city. I think one of the campaign promises made by the current administration was to reestablish the Department of the Environment. That's now became from the Department of Environment now to an Office of the Environment, and we are still yet to see what that office is going to look like. There's a lot of concern on the southwest side as new projects and new pollutants come to certain communities, especially in the Black and Brown communities, that there's no mechanism, there's no process to vet these projects. There's, believe it or not, there's no requirement to even provide an impact study before some of these industries come into our communities. We saw the case of the asphalt plant that is now operating and now working backwards to address some of the environmental issues that they have. Monitors that air monitors and all that done after the fact. And those are the things that we continue to see in our community, where we have a commitment to address that. Let's think about the impact in our health. Health is a fundamental issue that we need to take seriously, and that's what we need. Processes. I think many of us campaigned with that premise of, hey, let's empower residents to make sure that they get their questions answered before we approve projects, and that is yet to be determined by the current administration. I do think that at the state level and the city level, there's a lot of loopholes that industries still take advantage of, and I think we have a responsibility to create a process where before the permits are issued, we need to have at the very minimum impact studies, and we see other communities that starting to do that. I mean, in the north side, there was a group of aldermen that organized, get that done. I think that every corner of the city deserves the same treatment. I think, and that's what we need. We need standards. We need legislation in place, and we see a delay that I think we see the urgency in some of our communities. We have residents continue to organize coalitions, environmental coalitions that are starting to demand a process, and I think we're committed to do that, to create legislation, and for that we do need to take that seriously. I think the Department of Environment is a fundamental promise that was made, and I think that we need to take it seriously.
All right, the place where you can address it seriously is the budget process. And we just had a vote. What was it, November 26th, I want to say. 39 to 11, if I'm doing the math correct off the top of my head. 39 aldermen voted for Mayor Lightfoot's budget. 11 aldermen voted against the budget. One of those 11 aldermen was yourself. Explain why you voted against the mayor's budget.
We obviously saw the big deficit that we have. Obviously, we inherited a huge deficit from the Rams administration, over $800 million. And when we started the conversation, I think what became evident that it was a lot of hesitation about taxing corporations and developers and the 1%, I should say. I think that many of us started the conversation with, look, we have a working class that has been nickel and dime for such a long time. 250,000 people left the city, mainly in the Black community, because of that. That's the biggest issue that we have in the city, that we continue to tax a nickel and dime the working class to the point that people start leaving because of lack of affordable housing, lack of basic services, and a city that doesn't change, that favors corporations and big interests and put the burden on the small businesses and the small homeowners. We campaigned, and I think the city was very clear in the election that the city and the Chicagoans across the city said, we need change. 6 Democratic Socialists of America for the first time were elected, and I think we have a city council with at least 14 new members, with a new mayor that we all elected with a commitment for change. So when the budget basically took every possible corner to avoid taxing those big interests. We still see right now, and we really look at where the resources are and where the taxation went. We see, yes, there was a budget that was balanced, but let's see where a lot of these things rely on. They rely on help from Springfield. They rely on, reimbursement from the federal government, and they rely on, taxes for shared drives. They rely on in a multiple and efficiencies. So there's so many variables, right? Because you got to look at the whole package, right? Is a big whole, and for that we need to make sure that I'm here for a structural change. We don't want to be in this position every year, and that's what's happened oftentimes. And when we start the conversation, say, look, there are developers right now in downtown that because they have a connected lawyer, they don't pay their fair share. Let's just start there. That's where the big money's at. Like the payments in lieu that a lot of developers are avoiding. Let's talk about corporations that don't pay. That's one of the first decisions that Ram made. Get rid of the corporate head tax. So obviously, when we said we have a problem, let's make sure that we tax on the ability to pay, and let's make sure that we start talk about transparency and being fair. They put everything on the table. And not all the options were at the table. And that's what I voted no, because there's still, like we just talked about, the resources that we need for a Department of the Environment. We talk about mental health. I mean, promises that were made, the campaign promises of the new administration, $25 million for mental health. Mm-hmm. That didn't happen. We talk about homeless, the issue of homelessness, the issue of housing. We're talking about the issues that we see and the promises that were made. So we said, well, let's make an attempt. And to do that, we need to make sure that we tax the corporations and the people that haven't paid, the developers that are not paying their fair share. Mm-hmm. And that didn't happen. So that's why, my vote was no on continuing the same status quo, because we were elected to bring change.
All right. Now, you put a lot out there. Let's break it down. Listening to you talk about, there's two issues. One is the issue of the projections that the mayor makes, these sunny projections, these very optimistic projections that may or may not come true. So enabling her at the moment to claim the budget is balanced. Let's pass it. Ray Lopez, a different alderman, a different ideological stripe than you in the city council, voted against it on the grounds that he doesn't believe it's realistically balanced. And he could not, in good consciousness, vote for a budget that wasn't balanced. That was I've had him on the show. I can tell you right now, ideologically, he's nowhere near a democratic socialist. Now, your criticism, you did raise sort of what Raylo says when you talked about the sunny projections, but you're talking about something different. You're talking about the need to come up with new, more progressive forms of taxation to fund government.
Absolutely.
And that is a critical criticism of Ram back in the day, and it seems to have shifted over to Lori Lightfoot. Are you telling me that the administration did not seriously consider any of the proposals that the progressive alderman, the socialist alderman put forward for new ways to raise money?
Absolutely. And you see that as a clear evidence when the mayor put out that website, when basically says, well, they didn't propose any feasible solutions. The corporate head tax existed. We could reestablish that. It's not, of course, it's viable and feasible when there's political willingness to do it. And, a lot of the progressive options that we talk about, the pilot, the in lieu fees that are, taxing those who are avoiding taxes. They are avoiding taxation. They're not paying their fair share. There are buildings right now, for instance, in my community, in Pilsen, in Chinatown, right, that don't get any help and no breaks. When we talk about downtown, buildings are saved for $100 million, but they pay taxes for a quarter of that. Mm-hmm. In Pilsen, we have buildings that were bought for $100, $150, that now they have to pay taxes for $500, $600,000. Where is the equity in this? And when we talk about, that's Springfield. Well, we go to Springfield to talk about the casino. We go to Springfield to talk about the real estate transaction. Well, why don't we talk about also making sure that we have a property tax assessment system that helped us, right? When we talk about making sure that the developers and the corporations pay the fair share, but then you hear, nothing but silence. So obviously there's a lot of interest here at play, and corporations and developers that are continue to govern the city. And for us, I think to advocate for the residents and the small businesses that are being suffocated by all these regressive taxes, we need to talk about structural solutions. If we don't have those kind of structural solutions, are going to be sitting in the same spot next year.
So when you raise these concerns to members of Lori Lightfoot's administration or to Mayor Lightfoot herself, what is their response?
And when we have talked about, the tax, and then I remember one of the first meetings we talked about, well, what about these taxes, right? Well, there was not there was not real answers at this. I would have know that if they told me this is not feasible, this is not viable. They said, well, we're going to look at all the options. Mm-hmm. But then and we had months to discuss if there was any issues, if there was things that could not be considered, and I would appreciate an explanation of why. What are those projections? Why is not? Because when we look at the budget, right, it looks like it was a very unilateral way of looking at things. Because I hear many of my colleagues in the Progressive Caucus that have many other options and revenue ideas that were not even considered. So we never heard like any response or any explanation. So that's what to me was insulting to say, that no, this is just that the website was information for people to see how people voted. It was a lot more than that. It was a political attack on those who expressed dissent. And if there was an information about this, we should put in that website the reason why some of us voted no.
Yeah.
And then you will hear a lot more than that I'm glad the Sun-Times cover.
All right. Now, did Lori Lightfoot herself call you to ask you to vote for the budget?
I did receive a call from the mayor, and I did express my vote ahead of time. And I told her, the same thing, that we've been consistent with our message. We cannot longer afford in our city to allow special interest groups to avoid, taxes. We cannot afford the working class to be nickel and dime. And mental health services, for me was all. That's a very important thing. I mean, we talk about not only violence prevention, we talk about functionality for many of our youth, many of our most vulnerable residents in the city. Mental health, when we talk about the small businesses struggling, we talk homeowners being taxed to the maximum. So we said, look, and I don't want to be in this position again, but if we start making the tough choices now, and of course, corporations, developers are not going to like it.
Yeah.
But we will make sure that going forward we have a sustainable source of revenue that help us address the most fundamental issues in the city.
So when you told her that you were going to be voting no, what was her response to you?
No, but she understand. She understood my position, and that's how we left it. That's what, and we heard from some of my colleagues that especially a good colleague, Alderman Wagisbeck, said, look. This is a new administration where dissent is not only allowed but very welcome, and to see to see that the website, it was kind of.
All right, let's get into that a little bit. We've had a little fun with the website on the show, Byron, and there's two kinds of retribution, two kinds of punishment that a mayor could slap an alderman with for the high crime of voting no on her budget. In this case, it's her budget, okay? The first one is what I call propaganda, which is this website, which if you read the way it's set up, it's pretty clearly, it's like one of those, what do they call those polls? You know what I mean? Where it's really an it's really a campaign ad, but what's that poll called? You know what I'm talking about? It's like a kind of poll. You get a call from somebody, and they go, "Yeah, we're doing a survey about Alderman Byron Sigcho-Lopez." My first question to you is, do you know that Byron Sigcho-Lopez is a commie? Do you believe in that? Yes or no? I mean, literally, he's not a commie, folks. Okay, and even if he were, it wouldn't be that bad. But I'm just giving an example. There's a name for it, and Frank, whatever the name of one of our listeners is really smart. He knows the name.
Help us, Frank.
It's a kind of poll that they do. It's a push poll. There you go. So, thank you, Frank. You don't need to correct. Your Mueller is right there. So it's a push poll. That website that she put up is a push poll. It's worded. So if you go to that website, I always make fun of it. It's like these aldermen, these dastardly low-life aldermen voted against the great budget, just so you know. I mean, so anybody with any kind of sense knows that this is not a fair evaluation of the budget. Do you follow what I just said? Yeah. Then there's the kind of retribution where they say, all right, Lopez, you think you're so cool voting no on the budget, Mr. Socialist, going to stand up for the poor people? Good luck getting the garbage truck. Good luck getting the pothole fill. Good luck getting okay on that development deal you want. Have you seen that kind of retribution coming?
Yeah, I mean, we with some of my colleagues, obviously, we see with concern, right, how departments, because a lot of insiders are still in those departments. There are a lot, I mean, we talk about change, right? We still haven't seen a lot of change within some of the same individuals that were in the RAM administration. They continue to be in the new administration. And obviously, they were not going to like what we have to say. And now, if this is about having conversation and dialogue about how we run a city in a more effective way, right? And how we're going to be, in a city that welcomes the feedback, that welcomes that to be better, I will be very confident. But that was why, we were very concerned from the beginning. And when we saw that, and I got a lot more people definitely commending us for voting no to the budget. I haven't seen any emails or anybody calling me because I didn't vote yes. But the interesting part is when you say potholes, trash. We deal with a lot of issues. So and the prerogative and element, trying to undermine the authority. We said, listen, what we're not going to tolerate is disrespect to our residents. Because aside from the politics, every resident in the city, everybody, no matter where the zip code, deserves the same services. And that hasn't happened in the city. And that's why when that came out, we knew that perhaps would be the following. Okay. And we said, we're not going to take that. And that's what, we said, and we've been very vocal that that's just not how we're going to, because we need to advocate for our residents. So we're going to advocate for the same services. We're going to make sure that we get the same treatment as anybody else in the city, no matter how close or how far apart from the mayor.
All right. Now, let's move away from the politics of City Hall and talk about population changes, demographic issues. Byron, Sigcho-Lopez, the 25th Ward, folks, if you're not from Chicago, is just southwest of the city. And this is an area that always been sort of a working class port of entry, going back to the 20th century when it was immigrants from Czechoslovakia, et cetera, and so forth. And then a lot of Mexican-American immigrants settled there. It's very close to Chinatown. A lot of Chinese Americans, obviously immigrants living there. Property values are rising. And as they rise, gentrification occurs. I just saw the evidence of this in the newspapers. I think it was in the Sun-Times. They did a story about school populations falling in the 25th Ward. Public school population falling in the Pilsen area, which is Pilsen, reflects the fact that bohemian roots, many immigrants. Byron, is there anything the city of Chicago can do to sort of just put the halt on these real estate changes that are happening in your community? Or is this just a done deal and we must accept our fate?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a lot of that thing that we can do. What we cannot do is sit and watch, right? So, before I even took office, there's a lot of projects that were rushed, including the 78, a lot of big developers, a lot of people getting green lights, a lot of land that was being transferred, even churches converting into luxury condos. That's what we have coming in. So as we came in, and we were very clear with the city. In fact, I forward that there was not only the story, but followed by an editorial from the Sun-Times saying, look, you have communities, beautiful communities like Pilsen, like Chinatown, that deserve to be protected. And and we have the tools. We have the public policy. What we don't have is political willingness to stand up to these big interest groups and say, no, with the 78, no. We're going to make sure that we hold you accountable. Despite, you get all the permits from the previous administration, but there's a lot to be negotiated here, from affordable housing, commercial space, green space. There's a lot to be done still, and we're going to talk about this. So when we talk about a lot of developers that started moving in and say, well, with Chinatown and Pilsen, imagine with the 78, the tremendous implications that will have the 78 in communities like Chinatown and Pilsen. And we start seeing developers that try to even go above me. There was a developer on 18th and Peoria that said, you know what, we talked to the mayor's office. And I said, well, is that kind of the prerogative that we want to see in the city? When you don't empower residents to say what they think about that project? That's what this is about. This is about having a conversation about public policy, working for the residents who are saying, and being saying for years, we don't want more luxury development. let's bring conscious development so that we can do both affordable housing and developed areas. We need the revenue, but not at the expense of destroying communities like Pilsen or Chinatown.
No, I saw that article. That article was, we talked about that in the show. That article was in the Sun-Times. Again, I think France would be able to shout out to her. That was the article in which a developer, traditionally in Chicago, developers start off with the alderman. And then it's through the alderman's office that public hearings are held on development projects, zoning changes, TIF deals, all these kinds of planning issues, because the alderman is the local representative, and then they move on to downtown. That was the way it's been done. Byron Sigcho-Lopez, as I said, gets elected in the last election. He's an alderman of the leftist persuasion, as I like to point out.
The lefty bunch.
The lefty bunch. We'll get into that when we get to national. The lefty bunch. Suddenly, the developer, I don't even want to deal with him. I'm just going to bypass the alderman. I'm like, what? Are they flipping things up and down when they don't like the alderman? Or the alderman can't be bought off or whatever. They're going to go down straight to City Hall. What's happened? What's the latest on that development deal?
So this is the interesting part, right? And I'll be very clear. And, I'm new to the aldermanic seat, but I've been in the community long enough I even know this developer very well and how they operate. So we said, look, first of all, this developer is on litigation. So how are we even allowing this to, for this developer to even present anything? They haven't talked to DPD. According to them, they haven't talked to DPD. They haven't talked to the mayor's office. They haven't.
PD planning department.
Yeah, the Department of Planning. Mm-hmm. So we want to make sure that we have a clear process. I mean, we talk about transparency, right? We're not talking about imposition for neither side. But when you talk about why this developer goes above me, it's because he knows that he doesn't have community support. Now, is the mayor gonna listen to that? Mm-hmm. Or how does the mayor interpret this?
Yeah.
And I've been being clear to the Department of Planning. Say, look, we have a process. We have a zoning advisory board. We have lawyers. We have a process. What we want is more residents to be part of it. And I think across the city we hear the same thing. I think this thing about prerogative and all that, which is some kind of silent code, is not in writing. What we need is guidelines and a process where public officials can hear and listen to what the community says. And my concern is that this is being misinterpreted. And of course, there being aldermen, of course, that are being in process of indictments and all that, of course. And the public needs to be really careful with that. But what we cannot do is allowed to bypass any kind of community process for insiders in City Hall to unilaterally decide for us.
Right.
That is not an option. So let's work on how we're going to make sure that we have a process. We are developing a process to have transparency in that. And when the developer saw that this process may not go their way, they said, well, meaning I don't want to go to a community meeting. Then there's a danger because corruption also happens in those walls.
Absolutely. All right. So in the aftermath, has the planning department instructed this developer to go back to the community and work with you, or have they ignored the issue?
So right now, I think they said, well, they're all in litigation. So I said, well, that should have been, communicated to that gentleman, So that's the thing that is concerning, right? As obviously the city needs revenue and then we get it. But let's also make sure that we need to stop this kind of practice. It's not making it worse.
Folks, City of Chicago, I've said it once, I'll say it again. I'll say this before we go to break. You were sold a bill of goods on alderman and prerogative. It was a made-up issue. It's not nearly as serious a problem as the mayor and her allies made it seem. If you take the power away from aldermen, you're just giving the power to bureaucrats in City Hall. And I would rather deal with an alderman. Byron, there's a lot of aldermen I've had my trouble with over through the years. The problem is not allowing aldermen to have set up the situation, set up public hearings, etc. The problem is when you have all-powerful aldermen like Ed Burke, who just are allowed to operate their own private fiefdoms. Everybody's looking the other way, and that's the problem.
Absolutely.
But everybody who's against aldermen and prerogative are the same people who are supporting Ed Burke. Now they're all, look at Ed Burke. Well, you were the one who was supporting him all these years.
That's right. I think the Chicagoans across the city want a process where the alderman or the mayor don't make unilateral decisions. I agree with that. We need to make a process, but we will make it work. We will get rid of all of it including the alderman even seeing the process in
Yeah.
the first place. So I think we got to be careful with that.
No, you got to be careful with that. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll come back. We're going to talk about national politics. We're going to shift. Bernie, Hillary, the lefty bunch. Which do the Democrats do to get to beat Donald John Trump? We'll be right back after this.
Read the Chicago Reader to get up to speed on what's what in Chicago. Culture, food, arts and entertainment, weekly concert listings, weekly event listings, the environment, travel. I can continue, but you get the point. And for all of you Chicago political junkies, raw weekly columns on real city politics from Maya Dukmasova and our very own Ben Joravsky. The Chicago Reader, free to the public in newsstands throughout the city and online at chicagoreader.com. Read it now and be a more informed Chicagoan.
I am who I am.
The Ben Joravsky Show is supported by Northwestern University's part-time master's program in literature and liberal studies. Students learn from dynamic and diverse faculty as they build advanced skills for critical analysis, writing, and research. Evening classes are held on Northwestern's Evanston and Chicago campuses. The spring quarter application deadline is January 15th. Learn more at sps.northwestern.edu/masters. Hey, commercial break's over. Welcome back to the Ben Joravsky Show, live from the Chicago Sun-Times.
Byron, Sigcho-Lopez, Loreen, Targos are in the studio with me, and we're talking local politics. Now we're going to switch to national politics. Before we do that, D, you got an update for me?
Yeah, I do here. One update comes from, what's this paper called? It's called the Southern Illinoisan, so it's going to be a very interesting question. Get ready for that. But first off, I said we would read some questions here on the Ben Joravsky Show YouTube live stream chat room. Brianna, if you're listening, I sent you an email with the answer to your question. Let's answer one here, because we got Byron Sigcho, and he's riffing today, all right? We're going to talk about the lefty bunch in moments. Pat Rod, our good friend Pat Rod. And, dude, Pat Rod, we appreciate you so much, man. You've been around since the beginning days of the Ben Joravsky Show. A.K.A. before Ben was fired, So we really appreciate that you've been with us this whole time, Pat Rod. You are awesome. Pat Rod said, here's a question. How does Benny J feel about the North Center Town Square that's being built by the CVS on Lincoln? Wow, looks pretty cool, Pat Rod says.
What a local topic.
That's correct.
I have to say I have no opinion on this subject at the moment. I know I have opinions on absolutely everything, but right now that it's the project is there's a fence around it and there's cloth, so I don't know, man. I fight the skepticism, Pat Rod, every day of my life. I said this at the Hideout the other day. Loreen, every day I wake up, I say, I am not going to be skeptical. I am not going to be cynical. I am going to be optimistic and cheery about humanity. And so every day I battle it, okay? It's a fight for me. So I always assume the worst of any project, if you want to know the truth. So, yeah, I assume the worst, but I hope for the best.
All right, so there you go, Pat Rod. That's what he thinks about that deal with the cloth and all that.
I can't see it. And by the way, it's taking forever. Don't see it got me started.
Oh, and another question here, because it's funny. KMA Barry, who's been new to the live stream chat, welcome. Don't, keep on keeping on here on the live stream chat, I guess. KMA Barry says, when is the International Brotherhood of Aerosmith Workers finally going to step up to the plate and sponsor the show?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's pretty funny. Walk this way. Sorry.
Oh, good. Okay, and let's see here. Also, I just want to say we had a fellow by the name PC Amnesty that weighed in on the live stream chat. It was a little harsh in the get-go there on your PC Amnesty. Sorry, your profile pic's a middle finger flipping people off. I thought you were going to come in with guns blazing. You're a pretty civilized dude. You disagree with a lot of our live stream chatters, but hey, you're getting along, and that's fine. Thank you so much for behaving there, Mr. Amnesty. And that middle finger just flipping people off as a profile picture. Good times. All right, now let's read the article from the Southern Illinoisan here. I'm just going to read a bit of it, and Ben, I'm just going to ask you simply, agree or disagree, okay? The Southern Illinoisan, the writer of this article here, it's a columnist, one Brett Rowland.
Okay.
Or Rowland, R-O-W-L-A-N-D. Not sure. He's the Let's see. He's Rowland. Okay, here we go. It says here, Governor J.B. Pritzker. This is about all that damn dirty Illinois corruption, by the way. Governor J.B. Pritzker continues to talk about how he plans to clean up Springfield's culture of corruption and harassment. He has set out an ambitious agenda for 2020, yet he has so far been unwilling to confront the state's biggest problem with said culture. And that problem is House Speaker and State Democratic Party Chairman Michael Madigan. Even as federal investigators appear to be getting even closer to Madigan, the governor said Tuesday that he doesn't know where those investigations are going. There are no tea leaves to read here, Governor. The feds are going after Madigan. Agree or disagree?
I agree. The feds are. Listen, the feds don't call me up and tell me what they're up to.
Thank God.
But Loreen and Byron, I believe I've been reading all the articles. I've been following the ongoing coverage of the investigation. A lot of it's centered in the southwest side, a little further southwest of where you folks live. But Marty Sandoval has been mentioned in some of those stories. But I believe the ultimate target is Michael Joseph Madigan, the Speaker of the House, most powerful Democrat in the State House. That said, as I was pointing out earlier, a lot of these investigations, we're talking about this at great length today about Dorothy Brown's office, some lower level employee in the clerk's office is the one getting trotted off to federal prison and somehow or other never reaches the top. So just because the target of investigation may ultimately be Michael Joseph Madigan does not mean they'll ever reach the target of the investigation. So, I do believe he is the target. And I'm going to say this right now, and it's going to be kicked out of every lefty room in the world.
I got my bags packed. I'm ready if this
sorry,
happens.
man. The Republicans in this state have turned Michael Joseph Madigan into a punching bag. I have my issues with the Democratic machine for the way they treat independent lefties like Byron all these years, okay? But that's not why the Republican powers that be want to drive Michael Joseph Madigan out of office. They couldn't care less about the Byrons of the world. They couldn't care less that Michael Joseph Madigan was always challenging the Byrons of the world and having his operatives try to knock you off the ballot and put up phony candidates to confuse voters. They don't care about that. They care that Michael Madigan supports union rights and collective bargaining rights. And he has been very forceful on that front. And he prevented Bruce Rauner from destroying collective bargaining rights in the state of Illinois, which is why Bruce Rauner wanted to be governor in the first place. And that's why he's public enemy number one to the Republicans and the right. And Byron, Loreen, I'm not joining that lynch mob against Michael Joseph Madigan for doing what I think is the right thing and standing up for collective bargaining rights. What's your thoughts, Byron?
So obviously there's it's almost like the people across the city and the state, they always get stuck between the lesser two evils, right? So for me, it's always been about, because you see, you have the complexities of, well, you don't want, that's how Rauner got into office in the first place. People just being desperate of anything. But so to me, I mean, and to many of us, especially like I see the wave that Bernie Sanders brings with him and the new wave of politics, Alejandro Ocasio-Cortez and many of us, I do think that there's a better way. I don't think that we need to be stuck between the options that we have. I do see, the concerns that obviously many people have, like, right-wing extremists, trying to dismantle unions, right to work. Obviously, that's the biggest danger that we have, and I agree with you. To me, obviously, over time, I believe in democratic principles and values and building an option, that can speak to the needs in our communities. I do also acknowledge there are obviously the failures in our state that we need to address, right? And I think that the Speaker Madigan and unfortunately many of the people in the State House and in Springfield, I do think I got them too comfortable, and the big interests are there, and I thought that they could play with them. And as long as they're playing with them, you can do both sides. There comes a point when those big interests come after you. That is a dangerous game for me, and I think for many of us. And I think that we don't have to follow that. I do think that if we speak to the issues, we're really true to our values. And there's many things that I saw, like with the sexual harassment cases. There's other stuff that goes there. And I think for us, I think the main thing it is to build an alternative, right? To build an alternative democratically, not with the kind of extreme tactics or rounders of the world and the misleading and buying elections. I don't believe in that. I do think that if we're gonna do this, we do it democratically. We do it in election time. We do it with ideas, and I believe in the working people. I really audit, like when I wake up every day, and we see the needs in our community and the challenges, and especially now with all the things that's happening in the country, the climate. And it's easy to lose faith sometimes. Like you were sharing, sometimes, I want to be cynic about, but then you see working people working hard, still believing there's got to be a better way.
Yeah.
And as long as the working class, and I know that working class, the union, the labor, will rise, and we can, I can tell you from my own experience, we battled 20 plus years with corruption. Here we are. I believe Sanders can be the option. I believe that at the state level, we'll maybe get better elected officials. We have to do that. I hear you in terms of we cannot play the game of the right wing, the dismantled unions. And that's also confusing for people. So, to me, is let's build an alternative which speaks to the importance of unions, bargaining power, taxing the rich, environmental justice, all this. But also that we got to do this democratically.
All right, Loreen, do you have any views on this?
I think the biggest voting block or the biggest potential voting block are non-voters, right? And you have, when Harold Washington was elected mayor, I think there was 90+% black turnout. And then in this last mayoral election, what did we have, 30-something percent? Mm-hmm. And people were saying, oh, well, if you didn't vote, then you can't complain. But it's mostly working class people who just choose not to consent to the system of being ruled by, in national politics, by someone who's going to kill me or someone who's going to, take all my money but not kill me or something. And we need this movement to not go Rauner and not go Madigan, is to speak to real issues and not cut deals, not eke out something like, oh, we got you some crumbs, but what the whole pie is impossible. And, we need to stop electing people who say no. Everything the working class is demanding is possible. Education, healthcare, a quality of life with dignity where we're not, obey police or die or something. Everything that we want is possible through our collective labor and our collective organizing. And we need to elect people who are committed to that principle and won't bargain it away with people who oppose those good things for all of us.
Well, I would like to raise this issue based on what you just said and based on what Byron said. So many of my lefty friends, what really upset them about the 2016 election, which it's still, the remnants are still there, is what they felt was the unfair way in which the powers that be in the Democratic Party worked the situation behind the scenes to undercut Bernie Sanders.
That's right.
Now,
because the establishment decided who
they didn't want him. All right, now, so let's put Hillary Clinton in the rearview mirror for the moment and not talk about her. Some of those same forces, some of those basic conflicts, Loreen, are still at play within the Democratic Party here in 2020 as Bernie Sanders is running again. I get emails from my friends of the moderate persuasion, centrists, telling me I hate Bernie Sanders, but I'll vote for him if I have to against Donald Trump, but I hate him. I don't like him. They really don't like Bernie Sanders. So my question is, do you trust the Michael Madigans of the world, push come to shove, if Bernie is the nominee, to go as all out for Bernie Sanders as they went out for Hillary Clinton?
We can't leave it up to trust. We have to organize and, make the results. It's not going to be a matter of trusting them. It's about a matter of building a movement that they can't stop. If you look at what he did in his little microcosm of Vermont, and, I have a lot of people who, people of color who are moderates challenging, not a lot, but a handful challenging me about, oh, now the Democratic primaries are so white, the only leading candidates are white. But the reason that, Fred Hampton isn't on that stage is because he was assassinated. And, when we have people like AOC running for office, she wasn't able to break through until after Bernie had already run once and, push those ideas into the mainstream. And so, all the diverse left is rising, but it's only possible with a leader who is willing to not make compromises for working people. And so at this time, Bernie Sanders is that leader.
Yeah, and I hope, that we honor the commitments that people are making. Across the party, I see many people saying, well, we're going to support whoever the nominee is. And I hope that because the biggest danger is having the 45 president reelected. That to me is not we got to do whatever it takes to have a better alternative. And I hear, from good friends of mine and from the previous election and the hard feelings, with Bernie Sanders. But we got to look at the issues and we got to look at the platform. I understand, on both ends, there are probably hard feelings for obviously what happened. I still hear Hillary Clinton criticizing him still, So, and that rhetoric, I think, is problematic because at the end of the day, if I hear everybody saying we've got to support whoever the nominee is, well, let's stick to that then. And let's make sure that we have a debate, a democratic debate about ideas, about issues. I think Sanders brings key issues, the Medicare for all. He brings issues they speak to the issues of student debt. He's speaking to a lot of, there's no coincidence that young people are saying, yes, the generation is, suffocated by rents that can barely make ends meet because they're, they have a student debt that, cannot pay for basic needs that are really burdened by that. Obviously, they're looking for another option. Seniors, who are now, struggling, retiring, they have no affordable housing. I mean, we have pensions, you name it. We have a complex environment, not only locally, but nationally. And this president has done so much damage. I think that we will see the implications probably 10 years from now, the ramifications of these decisions, trying to dismantle the EPA. They have heads of departments who do not believe in government. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to dismantle government as we speak. So how are we going to allow 4 more years of that? We have to stop arguing. And like it's any debate, we can have it democratically. We can have it like we're doing it right now. But when it comes to the election, we got to realize what the biggest danger, like you said, the right-wing extremists. Let's talk about that. I hear your point. I said, look, we cannot focus on okay, who is most righteous in this discussion. We got to discuss the issues. And if we're really objective about this conversation, we have an opportunity to elect somebody who is speaking to those issues. I mean, whatever happened before, we need to learn from it. If anything, look how he got elected in the first place. I hope we don't make the same mistake.
Yeah. No, I believe very strongly about this. I think that I've spent most of my career writing just from a very tight focus, Byron, about what's happening in Chicago. And for the last few years, I've been zooming back and taking a look at state and national. And so when I'm focused strictly on Chicago, I'm very critical of Michael Madigan, of the Michael Madigans of the world. Okay, because I do feel they've impeded the development of progressive issues in the city of Chicago. And Michael Madigan's own alderman voted with the mayor on every single stupid TIF deal and every parking meter deal and every dumb idea that a mayor of the city of Chicago was trying to force down our throats. And they supported the Olympics, which was a colossal waste of money, and the Amazon handout, which was we didn't have anybody like AOC who's really representing sort of like the democratic values. But that's my analysis on the local level. But then when I see the role that Michael Madigan's most strongest Republican critics have, I see they don't care about Byron Sigcho-Lopez and the independent movement of the 25th Ward. They don't care about what's going on in the 22nd Ward, which is just on the road. They just want to crush Democrats so that they can enact their right-wing agenda. So I'm not joining their movement. Sorry, guys. I fought Madigan when the fighting was out there. But why would I join the movement now? I mean,
it's never the black and white issue that the mainstream media tries to frame it to be. We need to be in the gray and talk about, we can have better than both of these alternatives. And
I agree with you on
definitely
that
don't
point,
need to be held
Yeah,
hostage.
and that's what I mean. Like for like some elected officials like myself, we're focusing on energy and building a movement, building leaders, empowering more people across. So that's the kind of debate. That's what we need to focus on energy. I do truly believe I'm likely going to be one of the delegates for Sanders. I want to continue to speak on the issues nationally, how the implications are locally, and continue to build. And I agree with you. I think that these are the time. I mean, the bigger issues that we have, the separation of families, incarcerating children. I mean, this administration is violating human rights in different levels, and that to me is more important than anything else right now. Yes, like Loreen is saying, I think that we cannot trust that the electeds are going to do what they're going to do, but what we can do is organize people to make sure that we push them, and we push them to do the right thing.
Yeah, and it's very important that people also, coming back to the environmental issue, Donald Trump has declared war on the EPA and the employees of the EPA, and so that's just one. I always talk about people in northern Illinois. Okay, when your basements flood and when the water is coming into your basement because there was no oversight over the environmental impact of Foxconn project in southern Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. Maybe you'll think about the ramifications of electing a president or electing a governor in Wisconsin that don't care about the environment. That I think that there has to be a larger view of things than a smaller thing. I have to bring up this one thing that you did was very clever. I think it was Loreen's idea. I don't know whose idea. Oh, was it your idea?
It was someone made it on Dank Memstash or something on Facebook, on the internet.
Yeah.
Loreen has been all over that though.
Oh, okay. I thought it was your idea.
Know where it's
it
at.
looks like it's her idea because she's being.
There's a TV show from way back when.
Not my idea.
Called The Brady Bunch. Which I think I'm the only guy old enough to remember the Brady Bunch.
Oh, no.
Some of us didn't have cable and watched it.
When did the Brady Bunch go off TV?
That'd be like late 70s, 80s.
So nobody
It was on TV in the night.
But I bet it was on like Nickelodeon at night.
It was on Channel 50.
Ben, for 10 trivia points, name the 6 Brady kids. Go.
Oh, God.
Man, I can't do that. I didn't even watch
Greg, Jan, Peter. Was Peter the youngest one? Jan was obviously Marsha, Chris, Cindy, that middle brother, Greg.
I got the name if you need it.
Greg.
It's Bobby.
Wow, that's very impressed.
Pretty good for a millennial.
Studio audience, pretty good for a millennial. Studio audience, we're going to be sending Loreen steak knives.
We're not sending it back, but hey, for 10 extra bonus points, what was the name of the maid?
Alice.
Bam!
Oh my God!
God dang, man! You were watching a lot of Channel 50 back in the day.
We didn't get that hookup cord until I was 14 or 15.
You were deprived as a child. I know the feeling because my parents wouldn't even have a TV way back when in the 60s when I was growing up.
What was the name of that blonde-haired kid with glasses that hung out with them every now and again? I can't remember. I'll look that up.
Dennis the Menace.
No.
Oh, sorry. I'm getting my sitcoms mixed up. All right, so there's the Brady Bunch, and now there's the Lefty Bunch. Did I have that right?
That's right.
And I was going to give you the credit for it, but you didn't come up with someone. I saw it somewhere on social media, the Lefty Bunch. Who's in the Lefty Bunch?
The 9 progressive no votes.
The 9. Poor Raylo didn't get in there. He was a non-vote. Can't you have like junior members of the Lefty Bunch who voted no anyway? Like my good friend Raylo.
He's welcome to pledge, I guess.
Yeah, and Raylo, you hear that? You want to be in the Lefty Bunch? Raylo's like, no way. All right, I'm not lefty, not like Byron, but he did vote no. So the 9 members, and they are. Let's see, you just rattle off the 6 members of the Brady.
We got Sigcho-Lopez, Vasquez, Rosana Rodriguez, Maria Haddon, Mike Rodriguez, Daniel Espada, Matt Martin, Carlos Rosa, and Jeanette Taylor.
The great Jeanette Taylor.
Carlos Rosa's so Greg Brady.
Carlos was there before it was fashionable.
Yep.
So those are the left, and there's a song. Are there lyrics to the Lefty Bunch?
So there's 2 versions.
All
There's
right.
one that elevates the alderman, and then there's one that sort of maligns the mayor a bit more.
Okay. Who wrote this? You did not write these, did you?
I did not. These were in the comments on the post. On
I
Facebook.
see. Okay. So are you going to sing these riffs?
They're kind of long, but
Okay.
There's a story of a man named Carlos who was on the city council all alone. All the rest were in the pocket of big business. Oh, pathetic liberals.
Oh man, poor liberals.
And then the first verse of the next one is, it's the story of a brand new mayor who declared she'd write a budget of her own. She said there's no cash for your social programs except the cops you know.
Well, all right. I can see where these songs are going. The lefty bunch. So Byron, you're no doubts you're still proud to be a lefty in the Chicago City Council, huh?
Absolutely. I think is a good time for progressive politics. I think it's a good time for the city. I think one of the things that the mayor said, if they had a problem with the vote, the way they vote, I'm not complaining before I had a problem with the vote. Mm-hmm. I'm very proud that I voted no. My problem was of disseminating information as disinformation when there's a political attack. Mm-hmm. That was my problem. I stand on my vote. I think I got hundreds of emails from people thanking us, and I'm sure my colleagues probably had the same, thanking us for taking a stance, thanking us for fighting for a better budget, a budget that reflects the values and principles as a working class city, and that a budget that really truly, as the mayor promised, should not be balanced on the shoulders of the most vulnerable. I believe that we did not do justice on the issues that we have, and that hopefully we don't have even bigger problems if these translate into property tax increases. So that's one of the things that the mayor committed to, not property tax increase. And we said, look, if some of these things fail, that's exactly what's going to happen.
I mean, what does it mean to be on the left? Is just making everybody pay their fair share. The rich, big corporations, they come here because we have a diverse workforce that's capable of earning profits for their company, and they don't pay their fair share for the upkeep of that vibrant city that made their profits possible.
McDonald's has a profit, I think there's a corporation that makes $6 billion a year or something along those lines. Mm-hmm. $6 billion.
Capitalists, the rich, have socialism where they get bailed out, and then the poor have capitalism, and it's time that democratic socialists simply want to democratize the socialism that the billionaires already receive.
It'll be interesting to see what'll happen if, for instance, Michael Bloomberg is the Democratic nominee for president. I'll have you guys back, and we'll talk about. I still would vote. I would vote for Michael Bloomberg in a heartbeat over Donald Trump. I feel Donald Trump.
It's a benevolent dictator versus a, malicious dictator.
Yeah.
And we can have not a dictator.
Yes, that's
hopefully
it's all an evolutionary process to something better. Now, I'll close with this. This is on my mind. You're going to help me write my column, the two of you, all right? So I have to write a column for next week. The reader asked me to do this to sort of sum up. We're at the end of the year. We're also at the end of a decade. Mm-hmm. And so do you feel that we are better off as a civilization here in the city of Chicago at the end of this decade than where we were at the start of this decade? I'm going to ask each of you to weigh in with your opinion. I'll start with you, Byron, and then go to you, Loreen. Do you think we're better off as we head into 2020 than we were when we headed into 2010?
And that's a tough one.
Maybe I'll answer first, because when I first started working in Chicago, I worked at the Metropolitan Tenants Organization, and one of my interview questions was, what's the difference between like a movement and a revolution or something? And I remember being so puzzled at the thought that, a movement was possible or something, because it had never happened in my lifetime. And so there was always a hunger of people who saw, like, this city was just as hard to live in 10 years ago. And there was a hunger for a movement, and we are in terrible times now under Donald Trump. And it's shown people that it's necessary to get engaged now. So now the movement has kicked off. And so, it has tremendous potential to radicalize people and show people that, we should have had these things all along. If Harold Washington had lived, what a different city it would be. And we have the tools to bring that to reality now, because we're still here. We still have things to live for. We still love each other, and it's still worth fighting for. We have kids worth fighting for. We have shorelines worth fighting for. And now's do or die time. Are you going to step up and do something about this? Or are you going to let this moment slide? I mean, during Byron's campaign, this was something that I believed in to my core. And, I would say to people, like, look at Pilsen 20 years from now. It'll be Lincoln Park. Now you have the opportunity to time travel back to 2018, 2019, and you can make a difference. You can elect somebody who's gonna fight back with every ounce of strength that he has, side by side with every community member who wants to fight for this community. We can do that right now. It's an opportunity we won't have 20 years from now. Are you going to step up and do it or not? And enough people stepped up and made the difference. It's the same thing that's happened in 2020. Are you going to do it now when we have an opportunity to time travel back to 2019, 2020 and do something about this fascist? Or are you going to cry 20 years from now when your kids are battling to the death over a gallon of water?
Wow, that was pretty well put.
Yeah, and I like to be optimistic. I do think if you probably ask some people, and locally, right? They tell you, 20 years ago, you still, if you wanted to have an extra garbage can, you even have to. It depends on who you knew, right? I wanna believe that those changes are in the past, and I think hopefully we could move towards a city that really is for the many. We have 6 democratic socialists, right, in office that and I met like the lefty bunch that are fighting, and I really admire every single one of them. I mean, the level of integrity and passion to represent their community, the communities, is commendable. I don't know where we're gonna be, but I do think that we can write this chapter of our history together, and having the opportunity to serve with amazing colleagues like that, and many others, that have even, have other, Alderman King, Alderman Dowell. I think there are other aldermen out there who, also have seen, and it's interesting, that they can see the positive that having more perspectives bring, allowing members. I think we have 14 new members in the council. And I having a candidate, yes, we have Trump, but we also have a candidate like Sanders, right? I think it's this dichotomy that, I know people are wondering, where are we going? I think all of us, but I think that's what we need to be part of. We need to write this chapter of history together so that we can really pass this horrible, dark time that we have. We have, challenges, and we're dealing with those challenges, but I want to be optimistic. I want to see that this end of the decade in a positive light, also with the opportunities that we have to write this together.
All right, very good. I'm going to share your optimism for the moment. I want to wish you both Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year. I'll see you in January. Bring you back in the show.
Thank you.
Byron, keep up the fight in the city council. Loreen, EPA workers, man, standing up to Trump. Got a lot of respect for you guys. So thank you very much for all you do. Also want to thank Romana Hussain, who was in the show earlier today, Romana Rundown, and of course, the man, the myth, the legend, the pride and joy of Alton, Illinois.
Oliver, that was his name. The cousin from Brady Bunch. He had glasses, blonde hair. Remember Oliver?
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember.
I don't remember.
Yeah, that was the little character they brought in, I guess, when the ratings were going down.
I did a lot of good for the show.
I saw the non-Oliver episodes.
Yeah, look up Oliver. I bet if you Google him, you'll go, oh, yeah,
that guy, yeah.
That little weirdo.
Anyway, Lorena, as they call him back home in Alton, White Lightning, give yourself a raise, take it out of petty cash. Have a great weekend, everybody. See you next week.
Nobody calls me that. All right, and remember, you can download previous Ben Joravsky shows and Benny J bonus interviews at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites, or wherever else you download your favorite podcasts. Downloaders, we live stream this program. It's true. Tuesdays through Fridays, 1 until 3 p.m. Central Time, once again at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites, and the Chicago Sun-Times YouTube channel. Shout out to everybody who weighed in on the Benny J live stream chat. Even you, PC Amnesty, thank you very much for weighing in there and, disagreeing, but getting along. That's awesome. Brianna, Steven, the regulars, we love all of you. We'll see you Tuesday. And download those Benny J bonus interviews, subscribe, do all that stuff.